Any minute.
Go.
Go. Call to order the school committee meeting for Tuesday, February 11th. Please all rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Good evening.
We have our high school representatives with us tonight, Leslie Camillo and Adam Potter. And we will start out the evening with you, so if you care to give us your update.
Alrighty. So we have some updates about the student council, and they had their walk-in last Friday, which is like when they just get together and do activities and like bond and stuff like that, so we can build on leadership skills. They also volunteered at Cradles to Crayons, the Giving Factory, on February 2nd. That was a fun time. I went and we just like organized clothes and that sort of thing. And then they're going to be attending MASC, the conference for student councils from around the state, on March 7th, so they're preparing for that. And that's a fun time too. I've been on that. And for class updates, our seniors are selling carnations for their Valentine's Day fundraisers. And I think they're like $1, so if you want to buy one, I don't know. And then our juniors, which I'm junior, we're in the middle of planning our semi for April.
Yeah.
Oh, we're having it at the CLC, which is the Portuguese Club, like in the town center, and that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, on April 17th.
Nice.
The sophomores, we just finalized with Mr. Colantonio a date for our basketball tournament for March 14th, which is a Friday. We're going to be coining it March Madness.
Nice.
So that's been our big fundraiser. We've been playing this since the summer, so we're really excited for this. And then the freshmen, they've have been having a lot of smaller fundraisers. They're planning one, as I heard from, at Buffalo Wild Wings, and a couple smaller ones like that. For the school overall, starting the third semester of the school, second semester of the school year, sorry, third term. Stoughton's Got Talent is this Friday, so all you guys should come and support the people that will be performing. And lastly, last winter sports season is coming to an end, so you should see the sports teams before the season ends. That's it.
Are either of you have a talent that you're going to be showing us on Friday?
I mean, I'm not that talented.
Oh, I disagree.
We're in a band, but we just didn't want to show anyone up, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you want to share the wonderful performance that you had last Saturday?
Oh, at Berkeley, that's right. Just recently, the jazz band, this Tuesday jazz band, the jazz choir, and the jazz combo performed at the Berkeley College of Music Jazz Festival, which is a big national tournament, competition, for jazz bands and jazz groups. And the jazz band came in 7th out of 16. The jazz choir came in 12th out of 17. And the jazz combo came in 6th out of 13. So overall, a fairly strong showing.
Great. Very strong, and I have to say that I've been going to Berkeley for, it's been over 10 years now since I've had kids in the jazz program, and it has grown. It is a national competition. It used to be much more just an Eastern Seaboard, but they are truly from all over the place. And this was Stoughton's 20th year of competing with this group, and I got to tell you, it is just fascinating, awe-inspiring to hear these young musicians play at that level. Great job.
Congratulations, yeah.
Dr. Earl, you had a question?
Oh, I was going to ask for the Stoughton Got Talent, does the audience have to have talent?
Probably just clapping talent.
Very good response.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We're going to
We'll
start with you.
move on to another portion of the program which involves some students, in this case middle school students. So I'd like to ask Mr. Colantonio to come to the table and present the students who have been nominated as ambassadors to the 351 program, and he can talk a little bit about what the 351 program is. We've had students representing us at the 351, which happens yearly before, and you've met them. So will you talk a little bit about the program and then introduce this year's students for us? And Mrs. Husseini has a certificate for each one of them, so you'll have an opportunity to go and get your certificate from her, and then if you'll stand behind the principal so everybody can see you on television. So
Okay, and that'll be a photo op too.
a photo op, that's right.
So good evening. It is a pleasure for me to be here this evening. This is a great assignment for a principal to introduce the names of 6 of the most outstanding students in terms of character and all sorts of other things at the O'Donnell Middle School, 4 of whom could make it this evening with their families. Project 351, the project description is that it is a statewide youth-driven service organization that unites an 8th grade ambassador from every city and town in the Commonwealth for a transformative year of leadership, development, enrichment, and impact. It gets its name, Project 351, from the 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth. So it celebrates the ethic of service, youth leadership, and the diversity of our state. It was the brainchild of of Governor Patrick. The first day celebrating service was his inaugural year in 2011, and now each year every community sends an ambassador to the State House for a day to celebrate service. It was January 18th this year. And then now ambassadors are afforded the opportunity to kind of participate in a year of service opportunities across the state. So it's a silent nomination. Students are selected for an exemplary ethic of service and the values of kindness. These are wonderful values, I think. So the values of kindness, compassion, humility, and generosity of spirit. So the 6 students who were nominated to be ambassadors from the O'Donnell Middle School were secretly nominated. There was no application process. There was no essay that they had to write originally, although they did have a statement that they wrote once they got nominated. Their teachers silently nominated them for exhibiting service to their school community and to their community at large. They were basically nominated for being kind, compassionate, generous, committed students to their community. So they are 6 outstanding young people. I am very happy to have them in my building. We are very lucky to have them at the O'Donnell Middle School. And once the 6 nominees were chosen, they read a little statement to a panel, including me, and some other administrators and educators, basically about why service to the community is important. It was a very tough choice. All 6 nominees certainly could have been the ambassador, but we chose one ambassador, and that was Amanda McGillicuddy. I will announce her last. So now I think I'll just call up the nominees.
Great. And they could come up here. I have the certificates.
Okay.
And then, like I said, mention stand behind you. And
Does everyone have those instructions? Okay, great. I think I'll mention the 2 students who didn't make it this evening first. Just very briefly, Melina Nguyen is the Student Council President. She won the Prudential Spirit of Community Award, Honor Roll student, gives back to her community. She couldn't be here this evening, but Melina Nguyen was a nominee. Mark Anastasi, another high-achieving academic student who was involved in a camp for some special needs students that I think impacted his ideas on service. He couldn't be here this evening. But Brian Fallon could be here this evening. There's another honor roll student who's involved in a lot of youth sports in the jazz band, and simply chosen as a good neighbor and friend, and a kid who is willing to lend a hand to anyone who needs a hand. So that's Brian Fallon. He is here.
I just want to.
no, you need to come and get your certificate first.
Certificate first.
Your certificate, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Stay right there.
You can stay behind. Sorry. You gotta make a little room. Leah Campanario was another nominee, another high honor roll student who, in front of the panel, spoke about her service experiences at the library, at the senior center, and a lot of environmental work that she had done with the Girl Scouts. So Leah Campanaria.
Congratulations.
And Sarah Woodrow of the Fighting Woodrow hockey playing sisters. Fierce on the ice, but gentle otherwise. Sarah, another high honor roll student, a hockey player. She spoke of her temple traditions and the work that she has done at the temple. She spoke of helping some special needs students in computers class, and also about the amazing work that she did for us this year at the Veterans Day Assembly. Also a kid who is just kind and compassionate, and a great example for other 8th graders. So, Sarah Woodrow.
Congratulations.
And last but certainly not least, our selected ambassador, our Project 351 ambassador, Amanda McGillicuddy, National Junior Honor Society student, high honor roll student, had a list of service activities that did not sound possible. It didn't sound real. She spoke of her work at the Boston Rescue Mission, what an amazing experience that she had with that youth group. She was involved with something, I love the title of this, the Hip Hop 5K for Hip Dysplasia. Fantastic title for a walk. And I remember with all of these activities that she was involved in, in her statement, she said, "Be the change that you want to see in the world," and she seems to be really the living embodiment of that quote. So our ambassador, our Project 351 ambassador at the O'Donnell Middle School and the town of Stoughton's Project 351 ambassador, Amanda McGillicuddy.
Now, would you all four mind standing right behind Mr. Colantonio, so that way everybody will be able to see you at home? And we'll give you all a big round of applause. Thank you for your great service.
You can come
The
up here and
parents,
take
the
the
parents
picture.
can come up here.
I looked away, I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. Colantonio.
I know.
They're all, mortified, but at least they're not.
Yeah, stay with the
Really want the
bride.
hockey one, huh?
It's like the paparazzi guy.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Tough too, huh?
You want to get the picture?
Well, I'd like to take the opportunity, first of all, to thank you all for all that you do. You're really an inspiration, an asset to our community, our school community, to our greater community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Do I leave these with Mr. Colantonio? Dr. Rizzi, do I leave these with Mr. Colantonio?
Would you like to deliver the certificates to the other students?
Thank you. Congratulations. Okay. Next on our agenda is public comment. And Mr. Soros has signed up for public comment. But I will tell you that Mr. Soros, I've had this conversation with him before, and I unfortunately didn't bring my piece of paper along with it, but I did ask for our school counsel, our attorney, for a ruling, because I was concerned about having candidates for school committee having the ability to speak while our candidates who are on the committee are actually, by our public comment rules, not allowed to comment. And she said that it was well within her understanding that it was not appropriate for current candidates to use the public comment period.
Joyce, if you say I can't speak, then I will honor that.
Thank you.
Actually, why don't we debate that
I
a
had a
little bit?
ruling from council. I asked.
Well, that doesn't mean that it's true. We have to, I mean, we have other candidates that get unlimited talk, and I don't know if Mr. Soares is going to talk about his campaign. I totally agree with you. It has nothing to do with the school committee
Dr.
meeting.
Earl, I
It
will
shouldn't
ask
be
you,
here.
since it is not on the agenda for a discussion tonight, that if you
So
would like
maybe
to,
we
we can
should,
put it
can
on
we
for
put
next
that on
week.
the agenda? That would
I'm
be
fine with
perfect.
that. Could we add that, Ms. Shea? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
And I yield to you, Joyce.
Thank you. And
Nice guy.
next on the agenda,
Is the continuing discussion of the proposed calendar for next year, which was on the last meeting agenda.
Yep.
And to refresh everybody's memory, there's a difference in this proposed calendar from what we have seen, at least in the recent past. There is one day in this proposal for Rosh Hashanah and one for Good Friday as opposed to two for Rosh Hashanah. And part of the discussion we had was there are different districts that do different things. There are a couple of districts that do two days, some that do none, some that do one. And the reason for looking to take a day out as a day off, so to remove a day off from the calendar, is because, just to give you an example of last year and this year, and this is simply from the administrative standpoint, there's a very high likelihood that we will be using all 5 of our snow days this year. We've already used 3, and because of the days off in the calendar, we only have 1 extra day that we, before going into July at the end of this year. And last year we bumped right up against the end of the school year and narrowly avoided having to have school on a Saturday or a vacation day. So the issues of tradition versus practicality, those are really the things that are at issue in this particular case. Just looking at this year, we've used 3 snow days with a lot of winter left to go. So this is a way to give us a little bit more flexibility in that regard. And of course, it is the case that anyone who wishes to observe any religious holiday from whatever tradition is able to do so as an excused absence, and that is the case now and will continue to be the case in all situations, not just these. But it's certainly up to you and as far as the responses that you've gotten from the community and the things that you've heard and which of the ways that you want to go. Obviously, in no way is it written in stone, and whatever way you go, we'll just we'll cope with it as the weather and the days in the calendar fall.
okay. Just before we start the discussion on it, we did have Jean Ostroff volunteered to put it on the school's Facebook page and did so and solicit input from the community, asking them to email school committee members. I received 4 emails and 2 phone calls, and one of the people did ask if we were actually going to vote on tonight. So I before we start, I said I didn't know that was the will of the board in terms of whether they voted on it tonight or if they didn't feel they had enough information and would look for more community input. I wanted to make sure that we weren't under some time constraint such that you needed to have this calendar voted this evening if, in fact, we find that what we have is I think, some very good community input. But if we do need to vote it, we need to vote it. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure there is a law.
Okay.
Practically speaking, this
The
is the
sooner
time of
better.
the year that
Yeah.
we do it. Yeah, folks are already asking
Okay.
for it, but
Well, I will then let the board decide whether they feel they have enough information and they're ready to make that decision. I can share. I'll open it to you, and then I'll share the comments that I received if they are in fact.
let me, if I could just put it
Okay.
this way. It certainly would be, there are lots of things that have to get done, printed, things
Right.
that are a lot, there's a process,
Right.
and the sooner the better. So if it's not possible to do it today, I would hope that there could be
It would happen.
an absolute decision made by the next meeting, which
Okay.
is actually later than we normally would do it. But I don't know that there's a firm deadline.
And they may well be ready to vote on it today. We'll We'll see, Mr. Delansky.
Madam Chairman, I was going to suggest you read the public comments,
Okay.
or the comments you got, since they were addressed to you.
Okay. Well, some of them, I believe one or more was addressed to everybody.
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
Oh, the same one.
What I'll do is I'll summarize them because people went into a lot of other topics, which I'd already discussed with Dr. Rizzi, which aren't the purview of the school committee necessarily, things like back to school night and other things. But I have, just reading this, first person basically was in agreement that less days, that they would prefer less days. And they likewise see that well, they actually are also looking to do away with February and April vacations and combine it into a March vacation week, which is a discussion that came up again more than once. But this was a parent, and this was somebody who was in favor of the 1 day for Rosh Hashanah. I did have a request from a couple who I'm not sure if they didn't mention whether they had children in the school or not, but they were firmly in support of 2 days off for Rosh Hashanah. And asked if the vote would be taken tonight. I have another parent, which I believe you all received the email from, with 2 children in the public school system. And they feel that 1 day would suffice. They were not thrilled with this year's schedule, when we had 1 day and then had 2 days immediately off. And I explained to them that it was one of those, the stars were aligned just so, and the calendar fell like it did. That happened, and that was kind of an anomaly. But they also mentioned the back to school night as being a concern. One person didn't mention their preference on that at all, but talked about back to school night and parent-teacher conferences. And then I have another message that came into me today advocating for both days off for Rosh Hashanah, but also asking that, why we have December 24th off as well. Which actually I didn't realize until I went to the calendar. I thought that had typically been a half day, but I see
Well,
that's a full day.
that's the Hanukkah, that's why. December 24th is Hanukkah, that's
But we
why
don't
we
take
have it
Hanukkah
off.
off
We don't
as a
do
as a
Hanukkah.
holiday. But they would prefer 2 days off for Rosh Hashanah, and my phone calls were split. It was one for one and one for both days. So I really do have a split decision. Like I said. My answers to all of them basically were that we need to balance the needs of the community and the wishes of the community, and that we need to reflect the values of the wishes of the community, and particularly with the parents. I think it's important that our decision is based on the parents, but that we are in fact an ever-changing community. The face of the community is not what it was 30 years ago when the decision was made to start with the Jewish holidays, and that, as Dr. Rizzi mentioned, that everybody has the right to take a religious holiday as an excused absence, and that a decision that we make has to balance the needs of our students and giving them as much uninterrupted time in education and learning as possible. So I would open it up to your input and to anything else that you hear and your desires. And then again, whether we choose to vote on it tonight or not.
Okay.
Mr. Delansky.
Thank you. First, how do you like that? I am a traditionalist, and I am in favor of the 2 days off. And a couple of the reasons that I am in favor of the 2 days off is students taking that second day for Rosh Hashanah actually, in my opinion, are 1 day behind in the lesson plans or the lessons that they're being taught by the teachers. That's the first thing. The second thing is...
If they were to take it as an
if they
excused
took-
absence
no,
and other kids
either
were in
way,
school.
Right.
Okay.
Either way, especially if they took it as an excused
Right.
absence. That's what I basically mean. So therefore, that puts them technically 1 day behind. Secondly is the effect on the teachers, because if you do have a percentage of your classroom taking that second day off, what is the teacher supposed to do? Go back to because they're following a lesson plan, do they go back to cover for the students that were out, so they're up to date and up to snuff, and that puts everybody else behind because they're not progressing the way they should? That's the second reason. Third is the number of teachers that do take off for the second day of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. What does it cost the school system to hire substitutes to fill in for those teachers that are missing? That's an unnecessary expense as far as I can say. And the other thing is, and it just came to light also this evening, is the fact on the calendar it says that the June 18th is the last day of school, which is 180 school days, which also then says that June 25th is the last day if we have 5 snow days. And there's still another 3 days after the 25th, or if you take the 25th, there's actually 4 more days through June 30th that we could end the school year. So I think the argument for the weather end of it is both good and bad, because you don't know what we're going to get as the snowfall. So in this case here, I am, like I said, a traditionalist. I am voting for the 2 days, and everybody else can understand where I'm coming from. And that's my opinions.
Respect that, thank you. Dr. Earle.
Well, I don't have an opinion one way or another. I think it's worthwhile to mention that the superintendent told at the last meeting that she spoke to Rabbi Hausman, which is the biggest congregation, I don't know if you call it congregation,
Mm-hmm.
in Stoughton. And he recommended 1 day. And I don't know if you spoke to the rabbi of Shallow House, he probably say 2 days. Am I correct, George?
I have not spoken to the gentleman.
have not
and,
either.
I actually have to say, I did not say that Rabbi Hausman recommended a day. He was not opposed to us making this change. He understood the arguments around it. He did not say that he was, in fact, an advocate of 1 day. So I want to make sure the record is clear on that.
Okay.
Can I also have you, answer to Mr. Dolinsky's concerns about students missing a day and also the substitute situation? So if you have any questions around that. I know that you can't come up with an exact number.
Well, when we, and we can't because it's never been done,
Yeah.
But certainly from the various people I consulted, some of whom wanted to speak off the record, so I'm not going to say who the list of entire folks are, but a lot of people were made the prediction that most people would not choose to take the second day, so it would not be a major impact, then that those that chose to do so would be a rather small minority. That's only a speculation because all we can do is look at what other districts have done, since we don't have a history in Stoughton here, so that we could do a head count. We would have to actually do it to get a number, as far as I was concerned, but people generally seem to believe that the second day was not the day that people would feel as strongly about taking off.
Traditionally, we have done 1 day until last year, or we always did 2 days.
So
Unless
Last year was 2 days, but I mean this year was 2 days. But previous years, I seem to remember 1 day.
it falls on a weekend, and one of the days falls on a Saturday or Sunday, that it's 1 day.
That's correct.
Yes. Ms. Ovene.
I got a couple of emails. One said, please keep it at 2 days. Rosh Hashanah is one of our most religious holidays, and our children should be at the temple, not at school.
And that was a parent. That was
As a parent.
person that I also
Right.
heard from.
And then another one preferred that it be just 1 day. And the other thing that was interesting to me is that last night I went to the master plan meeting, and a statistic that they had mentioned was that 90% of our school-age children, both parents work, which is incredibly high. So that's, you know, I think another consideration as far as days off. So.
It does. It does place a burden on parents when we have days off to arrange for care. So, Dr. Brown, would you like?
I'm going to go along with the vote with the committee.
Okay, so I likewise really have no strong feeling one way or the other. It doesn't have a huge impact on me. I do believe that it's a discussion that we should probably open up, not for this calendar in front of us. I think that we have the ability to take a vote on this year, but I would really like to see, because the comments were so sincere and they had so much that they wanted to talk about, kind of around the school year and in February, April vacation and other issues. And I had an extended talk with somebody before I came here whose school had done a March vacation instead and did it for a couple of years. And I would love to be able to provide a forum for parents to continue this conversation. Mm-hmm. And whether that's an in-person forum or whether that's just a continued web presence type of thing where we can get some input. I think it's, again, critical that I'm hearing from parents, because these are the people that we're impacting. If these are the people who need to arrange for daycare and it's affecting them, that is the community that I think needs to be heard. I hate making these decisions in
Yeah,
a
I
vacuum
know.
when I don't feel personally that it has a huge impact on me one way or the other. But I will open it if somebody wants to make a motion to vote on it for tonight, or if you would like to try to solicit more feedback so we can make that decision at the next meeting. I'm open to whatever motion.
The other thing, I'm sorry, Ms. Husseini, I forgot at the master plan meeting, I did talk to two people, both of whom happened to be Jewish. They were sitting at my table, and both of them said that they were fine with the 1 day. So I mean, this is just one of those utterly thankless decisions.
It is. It is.
And it just, there's just no right way.
Dr. Brown, you haven't been.
I guess I'm going to go along with that. If a person from the culture feels this, I'm going to support that.
Mr. Dolinsky.
I was at the same meeting Deborah was at, and did not have that same discussion. But I have spoken to a couple of other people, and they were in favor of the 2 days. You know, but here again, it brings up a very, and I brought it up in my points, and I think maybe it's something that we should be able to do somewhere along the line, and I don't know, depending on which way the vote goes, one way or the other. If the committee votes for the 2 days, I'm all in favor. If we vote for the 1 day, I can live with whatever the committee votes on. But what I would suggest that we have and do something where we take a, it's hard if we only go with 1 day, but if we had the 2 days, how many kids actually miss? And how many teachers actually miss? Because I'm concerned.
Sure.
Because if the teachers are missing, then I don't think the kids are getting the education. We can say 180 days, but if the teacher's not there to teach, and I don't think a substitute is prepared in many cases to take up where the teacher is supposed to be in the lesson plans, then the students are being cheated somewhere along the line. Cheating is not really the right word, but they're shortchanged. Okay, I'll use shortchanged, okay? But at the same time, it would be interesting to see how many would have, if we had the 2 days or the 1 day. Well, it's hard to even say, but I'd like to know how many people would have been taking the day. Maybe we should take a survey of the teachers to see how many, if they had the second day, would they actually take the second day, if they had it available to take off.
Dr. Earle.
But we can just, I can just elaborate on what George has said, you know, what would be the impact. I think Stoughton, I was searching on the internet, is 8% Jewish. So we got 4,000 kids. That would mean 8% of 4,000, probably 320.
320.
That's assuming that all the
kids.
families would.
Yeah.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so the traditionalists or Orthodox would like to have 2 days, and the others would like to have 1 day. And the ratio of traditionalists versus non-traditionalists, George, do you have an idea? 1/3, 2/3?
I wouldn't.
If you say half and half, that would be conservative. So at the most, it would be 160 kids.
You know.
But here,
Engineering me.
but here again, it's just a matter of.
Well, but let me add for argument's sake, because clearly I have a last name that implies that celebrate a different set of holidays, and in fact the holidays that my family would celebrate fall at a time in the year that are one could argue even more difficult to take off than in September, when the workload isn't been as high. The kids aren't in the middle of projects, generally the first week or two of school. And that we don't know how many kids choose to take Eid as a religious excused absence. And nor do I know that we have a way of tracking that, per se.
Well, we certainly could. I mean, we would get the attendance figures from that day, but it would be very difficult to sort out
Exactly.
if the absences were for that reason or for other completely unrelated reasons. So then it would just look at whether or not that was a larger number than in the days surrounding it on either side, and that would maybe give us a sense.
And then looking at it from the other side of my upbringing, which was Catholic, where I work on Good Friday, and traditionally I've had to find daycare for those days. So my child could be home, but I'm at work, so the family wasn't really celebrating a religious holiday anyway, because my job says I need to be at work at that day, which I'm sure is the same for a lot of people of every faith when it comes to their religious holidays. So I think it's a really tough thing to try to quantify and put a number to and an impact to. Other than to say, I think we have to be just consistent and and make a decision that, like I said, it reflects the values of our community. So with that said, I'll go back to opening it if, for whatever the motion may be, for anyone that would like to make one.
I'll make the motion. I make a motion that we have the 2 days off for the Rosh Hashanah holidays.
Do I hear a second?
I think I'm alone.
I think we may.
It sounds like you and me.
It's funny.
I like it when the roles are reversed, George.
Perfectly all right. You take your lumps.
I don't know what you're
Do I have an
talking
alternate
about.
motion? And again, it can be to solicit more input or to decide on one day, so. And I don't get to make a motion. The silence is deafening. I'm going to take that as
Delay it.
delay it, because if I don't have a motion,
Yes,
there's nothing
please
to vote
delay
on.
it, because you know, I feel for the parents. I understand that, but I understand the perspective from the educator also. So I'm
With
I
that,
can't.
and thank you, because like I said, I was very pleased with the input that I got. With that said, I will ask Ms. Ostroff to bump it up again in importance on the Facebook page, and we can put it someplace else as well
Yeah.
to solicit input, because I would really rather the decision be made based on a little bit larger
Actually, I
cross-section.
like George's idea that you know, if we can get the data from you know, who's taking this. Well, actually, we don't have that because we had it off.
We had it up.
I know,
Exactly.
some stuff.
Yeah.
So this could be a nice experiment for next year, George, to see.
I mean, you could put something on the news service to ask for from a teacher's perspective, where you might be looking for substitute teachers, but that would still be kind of speculative as to how they would answer that.
I think it should come from the parents, because
yeah.
they're the ones who are mainly affected by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr.
I
Delansky.
make a motion, we table this discussion to the next meeting, so this way here we can move along.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Tabled, and we will solicit further input.
But thank you.
Thank you.
God, we can't even decide on 1 day or 2 day Rosh Hashanah.
Acceptance.
I voted for two.
Dr. Rizzi, next on the agenda.
The next is a donation of a scholarship, and so I'm going to recommend that you accept this scholarship, as does Julie Mitchell. It would be a new scholarship, the Del Signore Law Scholarship for Success, in the amount of $1,000. And the criterion is seniors who have applied to college must have a 3.0 and made significant improvement in grades in junior or senior year. A brief typed essay will be required entitled, "Please describe any significant adversities you have overcome and the achievements you have accomplished despite these adversities. Please include any details that show how the way that you've dealt with adversity can be an inspiration for other students. Adversities may include, but are not limited to, medical conditions, family troubles, or encounters with the law." So that would be a new scholarship for this year, and I'm going to recommend that you accept it.
I move the superintendent's recommendation.
Second?
Any discussion?
I have
Oh.
a. Oh, God, I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Earl?
Oh,
No,
just
Dr.
then.
Earl? You're
Age first.
I thought beauty first.
No way.
I just had a general question. This donor is very generous, obviously. Recommends a specific person plus the high school guidance to decide the winner. Is that common, or do we have any issue
It's
doing
very
that?
common. Different scholarships, some scholarships leave it entirely to the school staff. Other people have ways in which they insist upon being involved as part of their scholarship, so there's quite a variety of, some people ask to see the resumes of all the students, others want to meet them, others prefer to leave it entirely in the hands of the guidance department. So this is not an unusual procedure.
Thank you.
Mr. Delansky.
There's no indication, I know we're talking about 1 year, accepting the scholarship, which I'm very much in favor of. We don't know offhand if this is going to be recurring or each year or...
In all cases, we never know that. So no one who makes a scholarship in a particular year has an obligation to continue it. Some people fund their scholarship through they've set up a fund, and then when it dwindles down, there's nothing else. Other people decide each year to put up the money. Sometimes they change the amounts. Other than the Beaton Scholarship, which is set up, prescribed to be given every year unless there are certain conditions, any of the scholarships is a 1 year only. Although we do have organizations that have continued to give a scholarship for some of them even generations. There's no obligation to do so.
Just to elaborate on George's question, so is it true that we treat all these scholarships as a 1 year term, and then but we don't re-accept them every year?
No, once you've accepted it, the people can continue to give that scholarship. Only a
Or
new
stop
one
it.
needs to be accepted.
Okay.
Mr. Delinsky.
Just to clarify for Erdem's situation.
George is developing
Yeah.
a feeling for me after this vote.
Oh, I have feelings for you. The organization I'm affiliated with also gives a scholarship, and it does every year, and we continue. We get a letter from the guidance department asking us if we want to update any information or whatever, and we have over the years increased from 1 to 2 to 8, at this point, now 8 scholarships that we give to graduating students. So it's a recurring.
But you are not under an obligation to do so
No.
should your circumstances change.
Right.
Dr.
Like
Brown.
the fees increase.
Dr. Brown.
Can I move to take the vote, please?
So are you moving to?
To just let's
Okay.
go for the vote.
She made
So
a
we have,
motion
and do I have
to
Just to move
Second.
the vote.
okay, to move that.
Yeah.
move the question.
There is, in fact, a motion to accept
Second.
this and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
This is a
Well,
wonderful
did we
gift.
vote on the
and thank
move the
you to,
question motion?
Oh, I'm sorry, we have to
Senior.
vote on moving the question. Thank you. Take that back. We need to, all in favor of moving the question?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Now, all in favor
That would
of
require 2/3
the,
of our votes.
We got it, see now.
now all in favor of accepting the scholarship?
Aye.
Aye.
It's a wonderful gift,
Yes.
and
Yes.
thank you to Mr.
Very
Del
generous.
Senor. Yes.
Next on the agenda are the superintendent's goals. And we have them listed for you again. I think I'm just revisiting my calendar while we speak to see. We were going to distribute these the first meeting in March with the form, the template.
Well, we will create forms based on the template
Yep.
from the state. We'll use the state
Yep.
forms with delineated appropriately for us. So the forms to fill out will have to be, so that the entire evaluation will have to be completed before the election
Right.
on April 8th, which means that that vote and the conversation has to be completed, and the goals, the evidence of goals accepted, I presume the meeting before, which would mean the forms would be given out the meeting before that.
Did we, and refresh my memory, because again, I didn't bring my packet from the last meeting, did we actually agree to move the April 8th meeting? Because
No, we did
We did not.
When is the election? It's April
8th, which
Oh.
is also our meeting date. Maybe we want to take care of that so that we can set a date to distribute this so we know when we have it back, because whether we meet April 1st or after April 8th is going to be,
Actually, we
critical.
could do a meeting on April 8th, but it will be to belt.
Well,
Well, do it April
Delansky
7th?
have the polls to do.
Yeah,
I think
um,
the consensus was that traditionally you do not have the meeting on Election Day,
I agree.
and that the alternative choice would be April 1,
right,
in which case then that would be the day that the evaluation would have to be completed to fulfill the purpose of moving it, which is that the entire evaluation be done by the board that has worked together with each other and me for a year.
well, and I actually want to move it back because I think we'd have to have it completed the meeting before so that it could be consolidated and presented at that April 1st meeting. So they would have to be back March 25th, which again leads me to having that form out either the next meeting at the end of February or the March 11th meeting, so that people have the time to fill them in and to have their meetings and sit-down discussions with you should they feel they want to ask further questions. I guess regardless of when we have the April meeting, I think it is safe to say that we will want the forms distributed next meeting.
Yes.
Is that?
Next meeting.
Joyce?
Yes, Dr. Euro.
I'm a little confused. So we are not going to discuss the goals now?
Yes, no, we are, but
We are
I
discussing.
wanted to get the
Then
bookkeeping out of the
what
way.
about what's that got to do with the forms?
Well, there is a standard form that these get plugged into that are circulated to us for us to fill out for evaluation.
Just from Desi, right?
There is a state form.
Okay. So
There are several meetings. You have several meetings. There are 2 meetings in March. Right.
We're going to have them back on March 25th.
And you'd need to have them on March 11th.
Okay.
Back on the 25th, and then whatever work done and so on for the April 1 meeting.
If we vote on these goals tonight, is there any reason we can't have the forms out so that people can have a longer period of time, again, with which to be able to sit with you and discuss it, as opposed to cramming it all into a 2-week time period? I know that when I do the superintendent's goals, whether I'm the chair or not, I like to have the ability to sit and discuss those goals.
So do a turnaround in 2 weeks.
So if we approve,
It will have to create the forms.
yeah. But if we have,
I'll do whatever you want.
okay, if we have the goals, all we can do is try. And I think that gives us a way of getting them out to the people, like I said, so that we're not trying to rush the process.
Okay, so we'll aim for 2 weeks.
We'll aim for 2 weeks. But then we can open the discussion on the goals.
I had some comments, but nobody else have any comments?
Oh, no, I have plenty of comments, too.
Okay, go ahead.
It yields to you, Ms. Savane.
Okay, all right. So regarding the professional practice goal, so one of the issues that I still have with some of the goals is I'm not sure what the measurements are. So for instance, with the first professional practice goal, to develop a budget proposal that clearly outlines the needs and visions of the school district based on analysis of many data points and present this to the community. So I'm not sure what the mechanism is. It seems a little fuzzy to me about the analysis of data points, and I would just like to know what the data points are exactly. And then I want to go back to the Stoughton District Review presentation that was done by the state, and it's very close. What they had made a recommendation and what you have as a professional practice goal, and I would like to make sure I understand how they're going to be aligned. So one of them is complete and align the goals of plans and include a mechanism to ensure accountability for follow-through. So, you know, it sounds like the mechanism to ensure accountability for follow-through is what you're referring to as the analysis of data points to make sure that, let me see, let me go back to this again. So what they're asking for is that the vision and of the needs that we've set out based on the tremendous amount of data that we have, that is all aligned, that was one of the recommendations that they made. So I guess the specificity that I want in that goal is to understand what exactly you mean by an analysis of many data points and how we know exactly that you have met that goal. Like what are we measuring?
Well, one of the things that they were very clear about is that the superintendent's goals needed to be clearly aligned with the plans of the district.
Yeah.
The plans of the district, as we all watched, they were developed based on an entire variety of data that we looked at.
Yeah.
So looking at the data related to student achievement and best practices and all the assessments that we had and trends and all the things that we've talked about
Yeah.
over several years, and
Yep,
certainly
yep,
in the
yep.
last year, were the basis of the plans that were developed. And so those plans have been on the website for quite some time. They're very public, and they were designed using the data that we have available.
Okay.
So the responsibility is mine, A, to develop those plans, which have been done according to all of the guidelines that the state put out and using the process that they recommended, as have all the school goals. So it's my responsibility to make sure that the resources are there for them. And as you know, the budget plan was developed to also be aligned with those plans.
Yeah.
So you can see all the points, especially in the things that are new in the budget, how those are aligned with the plans. So that's related to goal number 1. So these goals have not been developed to be things to do in 6 weeks. They are related to, we're just getting to this process now.
Okay.
But certainly these are things that I've been working on, and the product has been available over months and weeks and so on. So it's my responsibility to make sure that those things get done.
Okay.
So now, the measurability is, do they or don't they get done?
Yeah.
We have all participated in the development of the plans, as have the school council, as have all of our administrative team, and all of the various types of data, which is basically just sophisticated information that's gone into the development of those plans. Those are the data points that these refer to. So will they will get implemented. Now, the next phase later, not for this set of goals, is to look at some of these things after they are in place for a reasonable period of time. Then we have more data to see, are these things working in the way in which we would like them to and expect? So we expect that our remediation programs in the hours before and after school targeted at particular skills at a particular population of students with particular issues will in fact strengthen those students in those areas, and we will eventually be able to see them on a new set of assessments. It is not to be expected that those things will be available to look at between now and 2 weeks from now, or even 4 weeks from now, but we're going to have to get at least the rest of the school year's worth of assessments to see if those things are working well. So I'm just taking that as an example, because I think that's a very important one with a direct impact on student achievement. If, frankly, those things do not work as we plan, then there are 2 different things to do. One is figure out how to tweak them to make them work better, or choose something else that might work better than that. But all of the things that we have looked at tell us that direct intervention in the areas that are problematic for students that are behind will impact their achievement in the general classroom. If that doesn't turn out to be true, then we'll have some new data to tell us if it is or isn't and why. At which point, the plan going forward for 15, 16, and 17 might have some details changed.
Okay, so when you go to gather the evidence, what I'd like to see is how these. Let me get back to my notes here. To see how the analysis aligns with of what you've done in terms of accountability, of how that aligns with the district improvement plan and the DESE recommendations. And then
I think where we're not having a complete connect is that the plans have been developed.
Yes.
We're now in the implementation stage.
Right.
So those plans were designed based on all of the data that we have to indicate where students were having issues, and then applying techniques, which means then putting the money in place to address those issues that we've seen.
Okay.
So it's I think we're talking about what phase of the plan we're in. There won't be, in this particular evaluation cycle, which is going to end in basically 3 weeks, the evidence as to whether or not these remediation plans, which have been recently put in place, have provided what it is we want. It's more than a 2-week turnaround time to see if those things are working.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure, because I would like to know, with regard to the various plans, that the massive amount of plans that we have, that in fact at some point there is some kind of summative evaluation that we know that there has been follow through, and in fact that what we think is the strategy for what we want to do, that it's actually been successful.
Well, we do. So the district 3-year plan leads to a 1-year plan, And so at the end of the year, we look at the one-year plan, the district action plan, and all of these school improvement plans are aligned to the district action plans and to the 3-year plan. And each year, then the principals will look at those, and we all look at them as an administrative team. The school councils look at those. So we'll have a completed 1-year plan, and then we'll look at the first year of the 3-year plan when we're putting together the budget for next year and see, is this or that project worth putting more money into? Has something come up that looks like it would be more necessary or more worthwhile? And then we will have some data on how students have done on the assessments that we used to place them in the remediation programs.
Okay, and then for goal number 2, where it says to develop leadership team responsiveness to potential crises and their aftermath through professional development, is the measurement that we are going to have professional development put in the schedule that will address that?
Well, this is an ongoing series of things. So we've had numerous professional developments for the leadership team.
On crises?
We've had a whole variety of meetings with the crisis team. The building crisis teams have had meetings. So there's a history of the work that the leadership team has done in this school year and continuing within the next weeks and months, the work that they've been doing on those things.
Can I just
go
stop
ahead.
for a second and interject, because one of the things I don't want to lose sight of here is that we're in flux in terms of how this evaluation is being done compared to last year's and compared to where we will be at this time next year. And part of the issue that's involved here is that the natural progression of being able to do an evaluation like this would be the school year. Yet this board has decided, for very, very valid reasons, to make the end of the evaluation cycle coincide just before the elections, which makes sense from the evaluator standpoint, but it doesn't necessarily make sense from to be able to follow through on the completeness of the goal. That doesn't mean, however, that we don't have the ability to use these goals, understanding that this is a first step into this whole educator evaluation system for all of us, whether it's the superintendent's or the teacher's evaluation, that we're going to be setting something that is, in fact, probably somewhat interim, setting this evaluation to coincide with our April election cycle. And then immediately at the end of the school year, when we've got data that's collected and plans that are being massaged for the following year, setting the superintendent's goals for the coming year at that point, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to do it in the summer.
And then we will have, going forward, that mid-year check-in process, and then a final process that's closer to April, but that this, in fact, does look a little bit incomplete in that we're not evaluating just on the last couple of weeks, but we're extending these goals backwards and including them in terms of collecting the proof. But it is, in fact, just a transition into the new educator evaluation system.
Exactly.
So,
No,
but it was really as much for everybody's.
I know that it's really, I know that
Yeah.
everyone is going through a transition. Our staff the same as you and the same as us. But
Me too.
I just want to make sure that that these are like SMART goals and that there's some kind of measurement.
If we were to step out of this process, which we're required to do and which we're doing in a certain timeline for the very good reasons that you stated, we'd be doing all this work regardless of whether there was an evaluation, because it's the work we do and who we are.
Anyway.
So it really wouldn't matter if people were looking or they weren't looking. This is the work that we would be doing, and we have chosen within the confines of the budget we have to develop programs and target areas that we do think will have the most effectiveness, and I think that they will show that given the appropriate amount of time to do so.
And I just have one last thing before. So you had something about, and I have to go back and forth, but the hiring strategies that you had. Let me see. Let me just,
Well, there are goals.
Yes.
And then there are also the proposed. There are the standards. So there are 4 standards.
Yes.
Underneath the standards, there are numerous indicators, and then there are subsections below that.
Okay.
So
Standards right
it's
here.
Yes, yes.
it's certainly been
No, that's where I am.
it's been made clear to us by the state that no educators are expected to produce evidence of having met all of the indicators in all of the standards.
Yeah.
So I chose a couple that I thought were particularly relevant to us at the moment, given this short period of time. And one of the things that we'll do in the next round is have a bit of a more meaty discussion on which of the indicators and which standards have particular relevance to us to work on in a given year. So some of the things that are related to the district review or the plans we have or the work that we've been doing, particularly related to looking at data and developing data teams and that there are a few things that have been particular highlights of our focus, and so I picked those.
Okay.
There are many, many choices. It is impossible to meet all of the standards and all of the indicators and all of the elements in any given year. So there were some that clearly were aligned with the work that we have been doing, the parent engagement work, the data work, and the delineating and completing of our hiring practices, because we recognize hiring as our biggest legacy to the school district for when
Also
we're gone.
communication with the new person we hired.
Yes.
Okay. So
So the standards,
Yeah.
for those things, there will be evidence produced, but the standards are not the same as the goals.
okay.
They are not goals.
Yeah.
They are,
The standards.
right.
Yeah. So, so they are standards rather than goals, but how does the then the hiring strategies indicators really relates back to the implementation of the Common Core? Because one thing, and I'm just going to go back to the DESE presentation report, because one of the recommendations is consider enacting and monitoring a recruitment policy that results in a pool of candidates that reflect the student body. So is there anything that we're doing with regard to that?
Well, when we're looking at recruitment and hiring strategies, we want to look at the policies and the procedures that we've put in place.
Yeah.
We are always looking to get the largest pool that we possibly can. So our switch to School Spring from the Boston Globe to put us in the place where most educators look for jobs
Okay.
has certainly given us a larger pool. We can't always tell from the applicants you can't always tell from somebody's application what ethnic group they're from or what
composition.
particular segment of a diverse population they might be representing. And it's also, there are risks if you start doing that.
Yes.
And not that you really can do it, but so this refers to the codification of our hiring,
Okay.
so that all of our principals use the procedure the same way,
Okay.
to make sure that they do meet all the standards for fair and appropriate hiring within the laws, but also to look for and be able to identify the very best candidates out of a pool, which is why we've initiated things like model lessons, so that you don't make a decision based on an interview. You make a decision based on seeing a person essentially thrown into a classroom situation, see how they do.
Okay.
And so that all of the principals are hiring using the same thorough and complete analysis of all of the candidates, as opposed to what might be idiosyncratic procedures that they might have learned along the way, so that everyone gets the same fair shake and everyone gets the same level of scrutiny,
Okay. All right. Thank
which
you.
was
I don't wanna
not
take up-
actually something in place when we started.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Brown?
Sure. Okay, so I'm just looking at it, and maybe I could help out with this, with the standards. This evaluation that she's having is the same exact evaluation that we get as administrators.
Yeah.
The superintendent gets it, the administrators get it, the teachers get it. It doesn't go into paraprofessionals, but as she says, she chose what standards that she wanted to highlight. And that's what she did on this page. I just have a question about your professional practice goal. Since this is interim, the question that may help her out is, it says to develop a budget proposal that clearly outlines the needs of in the vision of the school. You have the budget proposal prepared?
Yes.
Okay, that's good for interim. Okay, number 2, in reference to develop leadership team responsiveness to potential crisis. You do have a professional development calendar.
Yes, we do.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
And this, I just have to say that has been a focus of our work for a lot of reasons. Obviously, there are a lot of things in the news that make us realize we always need to be reviewing these things. We have had some tragic issues that have happened, not this year, but last year, certainly. And so our staff has had, unfortunately, a lot of practice in responding to tragedy. And they were extremely well prepared to do so. But that work made us realize that it's a gift to them to be prepared for things when they happen, and that our particularly superlative relationship with the police department has given us, and with the district attorney's office, has given us the opportunity to be on the ground floor with some cutting edge approaches. So we've taken advantage of all of those, but that's not so much in the district review as it is a personal priority of mine.
I'm totally familiar, yes. I agree. Thank you.
On this side of the table, questions?
George? We don't have any?
Dr. Earl?
We partly discussed this at the last meeting. Oh, before I do that, in the student learning goal number 1, the second sentence is inflammatory. I suggest you take that one out. We just discussed a little bit at the last meeting.
Did you say the second goal was inflammatory?
Yeah,
The
it
second
says,
sentence.
if blocked
Note.
by the teachers' union, this goal will have to be revised. We don't need to say that. My general comment is, I mean, last year we had the interim evaluation. So this year we are supposed to have a regular evaluation. And I don't know why we waited this long to have the goals, but in industry, when people do evaluation, I think in government too, you set the goals and then let the person work on it, and then you evaluate whether that person met the goals. See here, the superintendent listed the things that she already done. See, number 1, the budget is developed. Leadership team responsiveness, she says she did that. Triennial district improvement plan was a goal last year too. So I take an exception to this because these are the things that she already done. So that there is no purpose on just selecting certain things and then saying, okay, this is the evaluation. These are the goals we are setting. We are not setting the goals. The superintendent picked a handful of items. I have a different recommendation for this committee. The goal setting, maybe because the purpose of the goal setting is to improve the performance of the superintendent. So there are, as already been discussed, there are a number of standards. I think there are like 4 main ones, and then a number of.
Here.
I'm talking about the general thing.
General,
It has
yes.
a huge number of that. It may be. First of all, first recommendation obviously is to start this process right after the election. But also let the school committee decide, which of those performance standards that we need the most improvement, and then work with the superintendent to come up with goals that pertain to this. So the budget, I mean, we've been doing this every year, so I don't know how it is a goal, and it's already done.
Go to the standards.
Like I could think of several areas that we could set as goals. You know, one of them is, for example, transparency in the financial area. We had problems in terms of knowing where we are in terms of the finances. We had to return money to the town, but this could have been easily prevented if, for example, the town hall has been asking for read-only access at least. I mean, for our budget sense. Right now, they are working in dark.
I think
And we are no. These are the issues that we need to improve upon. So we returned $800,000. So how do we make sure that it doesn't happen again?
I think we've had that discussion in plenty of public meetings as to the the circumstances surrounding that, which actually go back to the previous fiscal year. Yes, there are 50-some indicators I believe that we can choose from. This was a conversation between Dr. Rizzi and I. I think the appropriate place to have this goal setting is, in fact, at a summer retreat immediately after the end of the school year, where everybody can be involved and we're laying out everything. But in fact, these goals are based on the improvement planning process, part of which wasn't completed until recently to get the whole cycle in terms of implementation plan. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that we've had all this information for all this time. We can't go back and change that the goals weren't set 2 months ago. My apologies if that was...
We can pick goals that can be achieved within 2 months, like give password to town hall to be able to read the budget sense. That's a really easy goal.
Town Hall's in the process of reevaluating financial software altogether that would communicate into. It sounds simplistic to say we can give. It sounds simplistic to say we can give them the password. I was dealing with the IT director today. That isn't exactly what, in fact, they need to get what they want. What they need is something that's seamless, and the software doesn't provide that. So to say, they have the ability to look and ask for that information from the business director at any point, and they have a good working relationship. I think that you're, saying things here that I don't necessarily believe are the experience of the town. And I get a little bit, crazy that's part of the public record that you're saying that as fact. I would love to work on the relationship with the town. I think we have an excellent working relationship with the town. It has come a long way, but to focus on something that might be technology-based and not something that can actually be solved by the superintendent handing over a password.
Actually, if I may answer, I am not saying that both town and school departments should use the same software for financial. But it will be good if both sides could not alter the data, but read the data and analyze it. That one is, wait a minute, I'm not finished. That one is just one example of setting a goal that can be achieved within 2 months. Don't get hung up on that. My main objection is picking things that she already done as the goals. And she has a whole job description. She has a lot of responsibilities, and then just picking a few items for evaluation, I think it's not in the best interest of the town, best interest of the kids.
First of all, the state suggests that we only pick a couple of items for evaluation, and quite honestly, the six that she has chosen are 2 more than they suggest that she pick. They said 3 to 4 goals, I believe, in terms of, and so this may in fact be a little bit ambitious.
Well, why don't we pick? That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
May I start? I mean,
Please.
in my entire professional life, the way professionals work is that I have always developed my goals, and then I present them to my boss, and we kind of go over them. But these are my goals. That's the way, any professional that I know works that way.
Right. You
develop your goals yourself, and then you have a conversation, and that's what we're doing now. We're having a conversation.
Excuse me.
The way even the Mass Association of School Committees recommends that we implement the new educator evaluation is that the superintendent and the chair work together to develop the preliminary goals, and then we have a conversation so that when we meet, we're not starting from scratch, but we have something that we can have a conversation about and kind of go forward. But that's the way it works.
But let me ask a clarifying question to you. When you get evaluated in your job, do you get to pick items from last year or from the non-evaluation period as your goals, or those are new things?
I pick ongoing goals.
Ongoing goals, yeah.
Ongoing goals.
So here,
That's the way it always is.
here, these are done already.
These are ongoing goals.
They're
They're
done.
not done. They're
Budget is done.
They absolutely are not.
Joyce, over to you.
Dr. Brown.
I guess what she's done here, Madam, is that this is the policy from DESE, from the Department of Education. I have the same exact evaluation as an administrator. I pick my goals. I sit down and discuss them. The teachers pick their goal. She discusses them with us. The teachers discuss their goals with me. I discuss my goal with him. So it's a whole chain. So everybody discusses their goals with their superiors or boss. So she's discussing the goal with her, and that's what she's supposed to do, as far as DESE goes. I discuss mine with my administrator. The teachers discuss their goals with me. The paraprofessionals discuss theirs with the teacher. So you're following protocol.
Well, the issue is, who discusses, obviously, both parties, meaning school committee and the superintendent, will have input to it. What I'm objecting here is we get this. Last meeting we discussed, I already pointed out, I said, look, these are already done.
But they're not done.
this
They're
is-
ongoing, hon.
They're
Well, a
ongoing.
budget proposal.
I'll get a great
It's not done.
evaluation then if they're done.
How is she gonna do another budget proposal between now and April? The next budget proposal will be in December, November, October.
The evidence is in the support of that budget proposal as we move forward through
So
this
why
process.
do we evaluate her on things that she already done?
If you would
All I'm
care
saying
to, if
is,
you would care
let's-
to pare down the list of 6 to 4 and say that that one is one that you would choose not to, I think that's a discussion we
No,
can
I
have.
will- I will
Because this
pick
is a
new ones.
discussion process. But, George, do you have any input?
No, not really. I've looked at this thing, and I've looked at it a number of ways, and I feel to a degree that the goals that are established have to be set between the committee and the superintendent and be agreeable. Okay? This seems to be agreeable to me. The way I see the goals, they're workable, they're discussionable, and at this point, if I wanted to modify it somewhere along the line, I could do that through discussion when we go over the plans and we go over the forms that we have. Other than that, I mean, these are things that we've talked about in the past. Things are being done, they're explained, and the way we decide to word it will be done and come out at the next evaluation.
And my take to follow up on that is that these are goals that are specifically linked to the improvement plans.
Yeah.
And that, in fact, if there are 6 of them, and that some of them, in fact, may be accomplished or near accomplished, at least we have discussion points for how we can move forward come June, after the school year is wrapped up, after we have a new set of data in place or in process, to set those goals for next year. And I think a lot of the next year's goals will, in fact, probably be the same as this year's goals, because at that point we'll actually be able to apply some measurement
Data,
standards to
yes.
them, results driven from the data. And quite honestly, in some cases it'll only be a beginning standpoint, because you need a full school year or more to really evaluate. But I think that these are, if I were to look at this, it is that starting point from which we can focus in on what's really critical to the school at this point in history, which is, meeting the needs of our children and their test scores, and using tools like Extended Day and all of the other, I'm trying to think of the Ames Web and other assessment tools that are available, and see how they're applying, and then evaluating whether our superintendent is making the right choices with those tools in the implementation plan as we move forward. So I think that this is really a beginning process, and yes, it is a little weird in that we are in fact not setting a goal that starts today and that's going to be measured in 4 weeks. I don't think that would be a real indicator of anything. I think that would be very much like drop everything and try to perform something in the next 2 to 4 weeks. That's not the that's not my objective here in doing this evaluation. It is to set up a really long-term conversation and set of goals that help us
Move
address our
forward
children's
and-
needs.
Exactly.
Other comments? Because I guess at this point I'm looking that we have an accepted set of goals that Ms. Shea can plug into a standard form so that we can start the process.
Ooh, one of the weeks is vacation week between
That is a
now
good
and the
point.
next, meeting.
Another vacation.
Another
Yes,
vacation
next week.
Is it the 60th
And, and,
of
and, if, and
Shoshana?
if we get the form on March 11th, that still means that people will have to get it back to us the 25th. If in fact it can be done some point interim and it can be sent to the committee, as long as we've agreed on these goals, they can
Right.
start their process. And I'm fine with that if the committee is fine with that. It doesn't
I'm
have to
fine with
be,
it.
the form doesn't
Yeah.
have to be presented to us in a meeting for us to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not voting on these goals? They are subject to change?
No, we are voting on these goals so that she can plug them into the form so that they can be distributed to us. So yes, in fact, we are.
Good point there.
So I move that we, are you looking for a? I move that we accept the superintendent's goals.
I second it.
Discussion.
Let the record show that I profusely object to this practice because establishing the goals or evaluating the superintendent's performance is the most important duty of the school committee, and we are really not exercising that responsibility that's entrusted to us.
Noted. Mr.
You know, I'm going to
Donsky.
vote for the proposal, but I think there has to be a revision in the way we do this. And I tend to disagree with what Deborah said earlier regarding her setting her own goals for whatever company she worked with. I was in the private sector for quite a number of years, worked for various companies who set goals for me, which I discussed with my employer or my immediate supervisor, and we agreed whether the goal was attainable or not attainable. But at this point, I think there may be, we should have a further discussion somewhere along the line, maybe not tonight, as to which way we actually want to discuss goal setting. Because I think as a governing body, we should also either agree or have a majority discussion as to what goals we'd like to see worked on and get the feedback and the goals from the superintendent and whoever and work as a conjunction and come up with a set of goals that are discussionable, reasonable, and obtainable. And that's my opinion.
Ms. O'Day.
So I would just like to read from the Mass Association of School Committees manual on the new educator evaluation. MASC strongly recommends that school committees adopt one of these initial steps. Designate the chair, let me see, or a special ad hoc subcommittee to meet with the superintendent to draft an evaluation document for review by the full school committee. In this way, you will take the initiative to prepare a document that is already well thought out before it goes to the board. In some circumstances, a school committee may be well served by asking the superintendent to draft the full evaluation tool for their consideration. As a variation, the superintendent may develop a draft of a full evaluation tool for review by the chair or vice chair. So it's, you know, we're doing what the recommendation is. This is a new type of evaluation, and I did give out last year the kind of step-by-step directions, and I'm happy to email it again. It's called, and in fact you can get it off the website, it's called Evaluating the Superintendent under the new Massachusetts Educator Evaluation System.
Well, Deborah, that's still talking about a two-way street, not like this. It says the chair or a group of school committee members. We have never discussed who's going to do what. So,
Well, but I, in fact, did work with the superintendent because based on the MASC guidelines, that is, in fact,
And
Well, their
that's the way we
suggestion. And
will.
that has-
MASC doesn't say pick the stuff
You know,
from last year.
This is
I mean, why are
exactly
we
how
picking stuff
this is
from last
exactly
year?
how superintendent evaluations have happened even
Yeah,
before the
yeah.
MASC. It's always been a collaborative effort between the chair and the superintendent to come up with the goals. That hasn't changed.
We're partners. That's the,
That's right. We are
That's the
partners.
thing.
We are supposed to help her improve, not say, she's great. You know what I mean? Let's pick areas that she could improve upon.
Can I move?
Move the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a
Thank you.
motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
To move the question, yes.
No, this was the vote on the goals.
Oh, yeah, I said yes.
And
And if I might just say, I think that what we have heard is a consensus, and certainly we have been able to do this. This is a year where we're moving the schedule, and that makes the set of circumstances somewhat different. In previous years, we have had time during the summer to have a more detailed conversation about the things that we wish to accomplish and how those might take shape of my particular goals, along with your goals and the goals of our budgets and so on and so forth. So I think that we will be having that conversation this summer going forward for next school year. And there'll be an opportunity, hopefully we'll be able to set up some kind of a retreat format where
That'd be nice.
there can be more of a conversation about those things.
And I might add that something we haven't done, and is very frustrating for me, is that we have not even done a self-evaluation ourselves, which is in fact not only highly recommended, it is, I believe, might even be required for the school committee to set their own goals and do their evaluation. And we have never come to consensus on the ability to do that since I've been on the committee. I would like that to be part of the summer retreat and that to be part of the conversation that happens at the same time, because again, I think that would help us work through this process and have a clearer understanding of what our goals are, not just in terms of how we do this job, but in terms of how we meet the needs of our parent community and student community and taxpayer community.
thank you.
Moving on, statements of interest.
I didn't get the vote, Joyce.
It was 4-1. So moving on, we have in our packet the statements of interest.
So, would you like to take the accelerated repair first?
Well, first let's start with the concept that we are not in fact voting these statements of interest tonight. They're in your packet and on the agenda for discussion. They will in fact be part of tomorrow's discussion and tomorrow's vote. But I wanted them here so that we agreed to move them forward so that the selectmen could also hear them, because I think it's important. So the vote that I'm looking for tonight is an agreement to bring them to the selectmen tomorrow and to discuss them in the form that they're in and to vote on them tomorrow. Our deadlines are such that
Oh, yes.
deadlines are huge. Our deadline for the Gibbon for the accelerated repair is Friday.
Valentine's Day.
It's Valentine's Day.
Or 14, really, that
It is.
soon?
It is. This year they've chosen to do a floating deadline, if you will, one for accelerated repair and one for new and renovated buildings, because last year they were absolutely inundated and they had a very difficult time sorting through the two sets of proposals that came in all at one time and setting up a voting schedule that made sense and that really addressed the needs of the accelerated repair. So this year they've picked a 6-week or so time period, or more than that, 8-week time period, so that they can have all the accelerated repair in and they can work on them and act on them in the early meetings during the MSBA calendar, and then save the larger spending issues for fall and winter.
Yep.
So with that being said, we are looking to do windows, doors, and a roof on the Gibbon School, which is in fact,
I thought we don't do windows.
we don't,
We do windows on
We
this
do
committee.
We do windows.
that is in fact the next school and the next set of items based on the facility master plan that haven't been addressed.
So are we voting
I'm
on the...
looking for this committee's support to move this forward so that we can apply for funding coming up in the next cycle. But the support I'm looking for is for us to actually bring it to vote tomorrow at the selectmen's meeting, because
What about improving these documents?
then
That's a discussion today or tomorrow?
I guess it's a discussion today. It is not a discussion tomorrow for something that needs to be voted tomorrow.
I thought, I mean, I could tell you Well, I could tell you, we're talking about Gibbons?
We're talking about the
Or
Gibbons.
you want to
We're
have a
gonna-
motion
we're gonna-
first and then discuss it,
Well,
or?
no, because I'm not actually voting on this. I'm opening the discussion on the Gibbons.
The Gibbons, I think it's a worthwhile project. The issue I had was just the English. I was looking at the priority 5 on page 14. I mean, that English can be quite, even I'm not a native speaker, that English in that paragraph could be improved quite a bit.
Let me get to page 14.
Cynthia is going to tear us apart on that.
I will tell you that these are modeled after the West and DAW statements of interest that went in last year.
What,
Yes.
what are, I'm curious as to what the complaints are.
Yes.
Well, I didn't mark everything up. I can maybe
Okay, so-
tomorrow I could bring, or I can email you
Why don't you
something.
just
No,
The windows are so foggy that it is difficult to see outside. I think what is meant is like they are translucent.
No.
That's exactly what is meant.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That means there is a fog inside?
Yeah.
I don't think so. If you read the rest of it, it says opaque quality of the window. I mean, we could really improve the English in here. And then it says, if you do the windows, the atmosphere is improved, resulting in increased achievement and staff morale. I don't know who wrote this.
Well, what's
but the
wrong with that?
atmosphere,
Wait. I want to understand, like, what's wrong with that?
Let it go.
when you talk about the atmosphere, it's not talking about the quality of the air. Maybe you want to qualify the atmosphere. It's like the learning environment. So this paragraph does need work.
Mr. Dolinsky.
You know, my only problem is that we've got these things just recently with a deadline of the 14th. I didn't realize it was the 14th that was the deadline. We should have had these things a little bit earlier to have this type of discussion on the first thing. The second thing I was a little concerned about, if I can relate to the other one that we had, the accelerated repair cost, and we went with the MSBA, I believe it was on the West School or whatever, for the windows, and the person, they came with the proposal, his numbers were way out of whack. They were
That's
looking
right.
to replace somebody. And my question on this is that knowing Joel's ability and giving him credit for being very astute and being able to do work the way it's supposed to be done, would we be better served in having done some research as to a cost analysis on this project before going to the MSBA and maybe being able to fund this ourselves?
I'm actually prepared to answer that for you with an example.
Like I said, why don't you give me an answer?
No, and I would like to
Why
because I
don't you
think
give us an example, Joyce?
I think that's, thank you. I think this is really, I'm going to use very, very round numbers. But looking at the other projects, and I'll take the Hanson into consideration, the number that we had from our studies for the replacement of windows and doors on the Hanson was, in round numbers, about $800,000. Okay?
Okay.
In fact, the MSBA assigned an OPM and an architect to us, and they came up with a number that was almost twice that. They have, in fact, since gone back, and part of that was as diplomatically as possible, saying that it was an architect who was unseasoned in working with the state and on public contracts. And even in a worst-case scenario where there is some, in fact, a little bit of hazardous materials mitigation at the Hanson, we have now dropped that increase from, it's not 800 plus 800,000, it's 800 plus 400,000. Okay? So we now have 1.2 million, okay? Using really round numbers again, we're going to get back 50%. So we're going to get back 600.
Right.
It's going to cost us 600. If we had done this project ourselves, and we could do it like Joel thinks we could do it on the proposal that we had in-house, the 800,000, we would be paying 200,000 more than doing the current job with the MSBA. Now, even though it is estimated at 1.2 million, that is in fact a worst-case scenario because the MSBA wants to know, they don't want to be surprised. They want the worst-case number budgeted for But there is still very good reason to believe that we're going to come in someplace closer to 800,000. So even though we're asking for 400 more, there is nothing that says we're going to spend that, but the MSBA says you need to ask for that because we want worst case scenario in place. So even though we've talked about perhaps the cost of doing business being a little bit higher with the MSBA, we don't know that to be true until we've actually constructed these. We do know that with the Hanson and the Daw windows, they did in fact take into account hazardous materials, which in one case do not exist at all at the Daw. And with the West School roof, they have chosen to look at, the West School is one of the few roofs that still has a built-up slope base, kind of a mud base that creates a slope for the existing tar and gravel type roof. And their worst case scenario is having to remove that all to chip it all away, where in fact our practice has been that there are just small repairs that need to be made to that type of structure. So in every case where we're asking for more money, it is our hope and our expectation that we're not going to be using all of it, but that we still in fact are money ahead by doing work with the MSBA. So I hope that helped.
It does, but
Make a
it's
comment as you're discussing this about the language. I actually believe that the language and the grammar are quite correct. This is a very limited space in which there's a certain number of characters for each box, so the amount of things that you can say is limited. The language in this particular SOI is modeled on the successful ones from the Hanson, the West, and the Daw, which have already been passed, and so those jobs are in process now, granted at the beginning stages. If the committee wants any language changed, since I take direction from the entire board and not individual members of the board, I wouldn't recommend changes as far as I can say. I won't say who wrote these, because now that the president's been insulted, I wouldn't want to say who they are. But if the board would like language changed, I would like you to vote specifically on changes, and I want to hear from the entire board that a change is requested before a change is made in any of the language in the SOIs. Because of those reasons that I just said, these are modeled on the ones that have already been successful for the projects that we have now embarked on, the ones that you're talking about, Mr. Dolinsky, where there has been some question about the MSBA working with them. There is a different process than when we end up doing it ourselves. However, the cost benefit is still in our favor to work with them. But these are modeled on the ones that they have found acceptable for the projects that they've already invited us to share. And I will say that the Facilities Committee has worked very hard with the master plan to prioritize which buildings we're going to be keeping the longest, so that the buildings that, because we can't afford to replace them all at once, obviously, the buildings that are in the best condition will continue to remain in the best condition, and that's why the Gibbons, which is one of our newest buildings, has been proposed for all of these repairs and replacements.
Mr. Dolinsky.
I just want to repeat just one thing, is that I think we should have had this information earlier than what we got it.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
This would have allowed some of the previous statements that were made as to the language.
If I can also say that Mr. Harding started working on this the minute the window was open. This is an extremely short window, and the website was not open to populate or write these things until a very, very short time ago.
It was late January when
That's true.
the keys were given and like I said, the passwords turned over. And really the intention had been for the Facility Master Plan Committee to meet and be able to act on that. And that got bumped because of, I believe, the snow day, which hasn't been rescheduled. So the process which we would have liked to have had in place didn't happen. But again, we were dealing with a very tight window.
Madam Chair, they also said there would be a quick turnaround on these dates to get this work done. They were very specific about that.
And what is critical to the MSBA as much is the maintenance and repair records of the building, the description of the impact, the types of systems we have. I mean, these are accelerated repair. This isn't about making a case for educational deficiencies or such. This really is about, my roof is X number of years old, it's past its useful life, it's so many 1,000 square feet. And this is part of a plan that we had to prove that we had documented, giving the date of the master plan and such. It's really quite a technical.
Right, so therefore, do we need a submission or vote to submit this, or are we just going to discuss
We're going to
this?
vote on it tomorrow, and
Well, we
like-
don't have to say, vote to submit this for tomorrow then?
no.
No, okay, fine.
But I'm looking for, if there is agreement on something that needs to be changed, it will be a board agreement. Dr. Earl, you had a comment?
But just, I offered my opinion. I do write quite a bit. I do offer my opinion because that paragraph tells you the reason why you should do it. So I think it's important to have that, well written. I don't know. I don't remember seeing it in the previous SOIs. Doesn't mean that it's there. Maybe the superintendent can check the previous SOIs. I don't know if they are still on the web page. I still say between now and tomorrow, we could just revise it, make it. There's also a lot of repeats in here too. So maybe we can make it more succinct, more clear.
Well, if you mean repeats from page to page, that is
No, I'm
actually...
just talking about page 14, priority 5, question 4. It says, please describe how addressing school facility systems you identified in question 1 above will extend the useful life of the facility that is the subject of this SOI, and how it will improve the district's educational program. So I think this could be improved. That's all I'm saying.
But I think we also asked for your recommendation on how to approve it, if I'm not mistaken.
I offered, like, I can come up with a paragraph between now and tomorrow, or, the superintendent can write something, or...
But again, I think the committee needs to agree on a change, and that this would in fact have to be in place before tomorrow morning so that changes could be made so that it could be amended for tomorrow night's meeting.
Well, tomorrow we can have this and then have the revised paragraph, but it's up to you guys. Do what you
So
like.
I'm going to recommend that we go, since our previous SOIs have been successful in the accelerated repair program, and since the language, having been over them innumerable times, is virtually identical, I would suggest that we go along with this. Are you looking for any kind of a motion?
I just asked that.
I'm sorry. Yes. So what was the answer?
No, and I don't know that I don't really need to call this a vote.
Okay.
Unless we feel that we are not in agreement on taking these forward to the selectmen. I think it's really important for me that we have, that we are in agreement, A, that we should be moving forward on the Gibbons in terms of asking for accelerated repair money.
So what I think is really important about these is that we're acting on the town meeting facilities master plan, and we're implementing a capital plan, a facilities plan, and I think that that's exactly what we should be doing. The only question I had in terms of format is, and I couldn't remember the answer to this, is that when we give our priority, is the accelerated repair program is different from the renovate and replace, but what I couldn't remember is when we prioritize the South School SOI, that's not a separate program?
That's not the priority is the one that says on page 5. Not our priority,
I saw that
Deborah.
well, this is for the Joseph Gibbons.
So
and it
priority
says-
5 is replacement renovation.
It says, is this SOI the district priority? And we're talking about the Gibbons, and the answer is no. School name of the district priority, and that's South Elementary. So that was my only question, and I'm not sure what the answer is to that, because I know that the accelerated, yes, go ahead.
I believe that they use essentially the same form for both kinds of SOIs now,
Okay.
but they're not 100% applicable.
Okay.
So the amount of accelerated repair programs you put forward does not jeopardize or enhance the chances of your larger renovation program
Okay.
being approved. They are in different pools. However,
Yeah, I
the
know.
form they use is now much closer to the same than they used to be when we were doing the green
Okay.
repair.
Yep.
And the SOI format was different.
Yeah. So then last year, when we submitted all those repair SOIs as well as the high school,
The high school was listed as a priority.
okay, that's
Yes.
just what I couldn't remember. Okay.
And now that it is no
That's fine.
longer necessary for that to be a priority, the South, which we had weighed
Yeah.
against the high schools, it has now become priority number one.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Dr. Brown?
I just want to say, since this is this format has gotten us success, why are we bothering it? And another thing, if there's an area where she can only type in, or whomever typed this has character based, by us doing it may throw us out. It's like when you're doing an essay, if you go over the essay, they don't even want to look at it. We don't want to do nothing to jeopardize what we already have going.
Let me ask for a informal consensus, short of saying it's a vote, if you will, that we are in agreement on the concept of taking the Gibbons Statement of Interest forward to apply for the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program.
I so move.
Yeah, I'm
I'm in favor of it.
I'm fine with that.
Dr. Euro, what are your feelings?
Yeah, I think we should get all these in the pipeline.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really what I'm looking for, so that we can have this discussion tomorrow, because again, I think it's, as Ms. Sauvanet stated, it follows to the letter our facility master plan and the follow-up that the Facility Master Planning Committee for the schools has done with it. We are in fact about 2 years behind on the schedule. We had a very slow start in being able to get funding the first couple of years that the plan was in place, and that even though the Gibbons isn't in fact falling apart per se, there are certain compromises, and it has passed its useful life, and I don't think it makes sense to wait. So thank you. Next SOI is on the South School, which is for the repair or replacement, renovation or replacement.
And this is being resubmitted because as we've been invited into the process for Stoughton High School, which was priority number one, the South School is now, so this will be to submit this as the now current priority number one for renovation or replacement. And we did know when we were weighing the two different schools, I think it was both the opinion of the facilities master plan and the data shows, and the MSBA even made a statement, or some people did, that from the just pure building standpoint, the South is in even worse condition than the high school, but that the impact of the high school condition on the programming made that for us priority one. But we are looking at a school that's in fairly bad shape.
And this, in fact, is a repopulated SOI. Don't believe there is any new information that was added. This is, in fact, the form that was submitted last year. And the MSBA, when you submit an SOI and it is not acted upon, volunteers to repopulate it with the existing data for you. So you are, in fact, not looking at anything different than was submitted last year or that was approved last year.
Joyce, what is the deadline on this one?
April something, April 11th.
So we got more time to
believe
work
it's
on
April
this.
11th.
Yeah, except that I think, again, this is probably the bigger one in terms, it's certainly the bigger one in terms of capital outlay for the town and the impact on the budget. So I think it's important that this discussion starts tomorrow with the selectmen. In fact, we do have a little bit of time
To improve upon it.
It's
well,
certainly
again, understand that this is what was voted last year and improved on last year by both committees as we went through the process. And in fact, the MSBA has, like I said, the feedback when they did the senior site visit to us personally as we walked the halls was they saw the need. I don't know that there's a lot of convincing to do with the language, other than that we're fulfilling the letter of the law, that we're giving them all the studies and repair records that they're asking for. Again, far more critical.
The staff is certainly hoping that the joint boards taking this opportunity to meet together tomorrow, since the SOIs do need the votes of both boards, that in fact this can be a matter that is finished tomorrow so that the submissions can be made.
Absolutely.
That's the goal of the staff.
Well said. Are there any questions, discussion on?
I had some on page 6. It says, does the district have a master educational plan that includes facility goals for this building and all school buildings and districts? Don't we have that? We put down no.
We do not have, we have several components of the master educational plan, and that is something the Facilities Committee is actually working on its agenda. And again, with the meeting that was delayed, one of the thoughts is where we need to go with that. A master educational plan, gosh, we looked at Swampscott's, which is, 300 or 400 pages
Is
big.
that something the superintendent does, or
No,
the facilities
no.
committee does?
It's actually a number of, it comes from a number of places. Part of it is the education, or the enrollment predictions are part of it, in which we've done. We have outside services that do that. That's one chapter of it. The facilities master plan is one chapter of it. Certainly parts of it do belong to the administration, but there are parts where we probably are still looking to have to essentially hire a consultant that
Have to hire a consultant
Yeah.
to write it?
not to write the whole plan, but those portions of
Can
it
you
that.
take the Swampscott and just change it to Stoughton?
Oh, I'd love to. But we are more than halfway, and I'd probably venture to say we're probably more than 80% of where we need to be in terms of the components that go into it, with the facility master plan being the biggest component of it. But we don't, in fact, have a formal master education plan.
Now, I had a question on page 12. Talks about the building doesn't have ADA compliance. It
Correct.
says students have been relocated to other elementary schools due to lack of ADA compliance. So are we talking about like they register to other schools, or like if something breaks, they are moved to other school in the middle of the
No, I think this is more, and again,
I'm sorry?
it's programmatic. It's for, say you have a child who has a physical needs that we know that the ramps do not meet ADA code. They have ramps. It's a good thing. They met code when they were designed many, many years ago. They don't meet current code. There are a number of places that are inaccessible. I think there was a temporary lift that was kind of permanently put in place to solve one matter. But long term, if we had a child who had wheelchair or other needs that we couldn't meet with temporary solutions, that the solution would be to, in fact, assign them to a different district. We had a waiver on this building, not... Different school, sorry, good point. We had a waiver on this building in terms of being obligated to meet the ADA compliance back 10 plus years ago when the schools were retrofitted for ADA, because physically we just couldn't without an incredible, at the time it was 3 or 4 million. It was cost prohibitive. It's probably twice that now.
But that's pretty commonplace, have kids not being able to access schools, or it's rare? Just for my information, we don't need
In Stoughton, it's rare, but there was a time when we were in the middle of the process where it certainly was the case. Before the elevator was put into place at the Daw School, that say the child break a leg, you'd have to relocate a classroom downstairs. Or you'd have to have that child maybe be impacted in terms of art or computers or the other resources that were located on the top floor. It is not ideal. It is the only school at this point that has such severe ADA issues.
Okay. And then I had questions about page 13. Again, I think this is the most important paragraph. And it's asking how the education and the teachers and students affected by the problems of this building. So maybe this could also be refocused. And the question I had was, I thought it was in the previous SOI. We were saying the building has asbestos problems, lead problems in the water. And I seem to remember sprinkler problems. So
I'll have to. This is a repopulation of the SOI that was submitted last.
maybe we changed it because maybe the first version had the lead in the water, and
I think that was a change that was made last year
I see.
before we submitted it, and this was the submitted version.
Okay, but we don't have those problems anymore, lead problem and the asbestos problem.
Well, asbestos is actually prevalent in tiles in all of the schools that are pre-1970 something. I mean, most of our schools have asbestos floor tiles, VCT tiles that are considered safe until they are compromised, and then we address them. Lead has been an issue in some of the schools' non-potable water supplies, janitor closets and such, and if they are found in drinking fountains, they are in fact essentially shut off or remediated.
So that would be a more compelling reason to,
It would be, but I don't feel safe saying that current tests show that there's lead that would impact students at this point if that's not in fact what's happening.
okay.
Can we move on now?
Yes. Do I have a thank you? I just like being here. Do we have a agreement to move this forward in terms of the priority for the
Yeah.
schools to?
I had one more question.
Okay.
What are the chances of this and the high school being funded by or being addressed by MSBA within
Consecutive years?
consecutive years or like 2 years apart?
I cannot tell you what the MSBA feels. I can tell you that in my current job, where we do a great deal of MSBA contracts, we have more than one. In many towns, there's more than one school project going on at the same time that we're voting.
They are both like a new schools?
They're both either new or renovations. Yeah. The MSBA looks at need. One of the things that the MSBA did several years ago is they hired an engineering firm, it's about 3 or 4 years ago, to go through the state and rate every building 1 through 4. 1 being a good condition, 4 being it should be closed. At that point, the South School rated a 3. That was several years ago. Since then, every level 4 school in the state has either been funded by the MSBA or has been closed by the town. They are now moving on to level 3 schools, and they see this as their priority, working backwards in terms of condition. I can't speak for the MSBA. I don't know what the chances are, but like I said, we wouldn't be the first town with more than one project in the pipeline.
Okay.
So, do we feel that it is important? Mr.
Just one
Goldstein?
question. It just dawns on me. Is there any possibility or any thought to combining elementary schools? Whereas, finish?
Can I just address this?
Can I finish?
Yes, go
Please
ahead.
let him finish.
Yes, go ahead.
instead of having 5 elementary schools,
Yep.
having 2 or 3, whatever, based on the growing population in various areas.
So the feasibility study committee did have a number of discussions about this, and I think that if we have a project like this approved, that in the course of a feasibility study, which will need to be done, I think that would be the perfect time to kind of look at that issue and what the implications are. I have my own thoughts as to what I think would be the best way to go, but that's just my personal thoughts.
But Ms. Sauvanet hit it right on the head. It is we all have our personal thoughts about what it, but you know what,
Right.
the MSBA doesn't care.
Yeah.
The MSBA, I think when we're looking at a feasibility study for an elementary school, that we are in fact looking at a feasibility study that's going to be far more involved than the one for the high school because of that very issue in terms of projected enrollment, neighborhood demographics, and where the best money is spent.
And we have the land here to kind of think a little bit, look on down the line as to what our needs are, where we have services offered, and what we're going to need decades into the future. So the answer is yes. Even back as far as 2011, there was thought and discussion about that, but that's something that's going to involve a larger discussion with a lot more people. But I think that should this be accepted, that would be the perfect case for us to kind of think about what our needs are, what the children's needs are, and the district's needs going forward.
And
Dr.
Mr.
Rizzi has some comments.
No, that's all I was going to say. That,
We were involved in the same discussion. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Sorry, George. It's
No, it's all right.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a bigger gym. That's all.
Dr. Earls left the room, but I'm looking for.
Really good.
This sounds great. So I'd say you're not looking for a vote.
No, but I'm
you're just
looking
looking for a consensus.
Consensus.
I think this is great. This needs to be done, and it fulfills the facilities master plan's goals. So.
I'm all for it.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. So we will be discussing these and perhaps voting on them tomorrow night at the joint meeting.
Do we have to note that Dr. Earl
No.
didn't
No,
do that?
because it wasn't a vote. It was
Okay, good.
consensus.
Okay.
And yay.
Just give him the opportunity.
Sorry that I've dragged this meeting on for so long, but there's so many good
Yeah,
things.
I know. Well, now I'm really looking forward to hearing about this from.
Something related to education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I hope to do tonight is give you an update on the status of the next anticipated state mandate, which would be the Massachusetts Kindergarten Entry Assessment. As you know, as you may know, we do accept the kindergarten grant, the quality
Yes.
full-day kindergarten grant, and it provides a significant amount of funding to allow us to provide free full-day kindergarten at all of our elementary schools. But what the state has done is they piggybacked on the next part of their master plan in terms of assessment to schools that do in fact receive a kindergarten grant, because then if they require it as part of the grant receiving process, it's not considered an unfunded mandate. And I sent this out to you to bring you up to speed on what we were expecting to see. And in fact, between the time that I gave this to Ms. Shea last week and tonight's meeting, we have in fact received notice from the state that we will be in the third cohort
Oh, great.
or implementing the MKEA as it's called, and we will be implementing in fact next year. And what this is there's an assessment called the Learning Standards Gold, and it's an assessment that's utilized from birth, can be utilized from birth all the way through kindergarten. And what it is, it's an assessment based on ongoing observations of children that allow you to figure out what they can actually do in 10 different domains. And ideally what you do is if you can assess what they do and where they're at in the developmental process, you can then actually figure out what they're capable of doing next. And you can target your instruction to where the kids are and what you should be teaching them and developing in them, so that your instruction is much more effective. And it's much easier for a teacher to figure out what strategy might work for an individual student in the class, as opposed to using a single strategy based on the average developmental place of the class itself. So it's a very good assessment, but the thing that we're going to need to sort out is where it fits with all the other things which we have in place. As you know, we put the Ames Web online last year, which I'm sure is going to have a certain level of redundancy with this. And also, if the state does pursue PARCC testing, there is a PARCC K-2 assessment that will be coming online.
That made me cringe.
And you know, this is one of those things where
A pre-K computer assessment?
Well, not all the PARCC assessments are based on computer-generated tests. In fact, when we're doing our pilot with PARCC this coming year, we're only using a computer-based assessment at the high school, where the middle school and the DAW will be using paper-based assessments. So, I mean, it remains to be seen what those are going to look like. But this assessment is actually, it's a good assessment. There were a number of assessments on the table when they did their first cohort. I believe there were 5 the first year. That was whittled down to 2 this last cohort. And we had anticipated them going with 1. And in fact, we have the assessment. We already got a copy of it. We already have it available for a group of teachers to take a look at. And it is the thing where there has been a lot of really positive feedback about this particular assessment. The thing that this brings to the table that none of the other trial assessments would have been able to do for us is we can actually use this in our pre-K. And we can use it in our pre-K classrooms all the way back to children at the age of 3. So we could have actually a continuum of data on these kids on how they're doing developmentally all through our pre-K program, so that when they do in fact get to kindergarten, we can have a great profile to hand our teachers, in particular for kids that are struggling academically, so that even before school starts, they can look at strategies that are potentially beneficial to these kids, so that the teachers don't have to go through the process of figuring out where their kids are at, and that takes a lot of time in kindergarten. If you have 20 kids that you see for the first time or the first day of school, it takes a significant amount of time to figure out where all the kids are at, and then ideally target instruction. And when I look at this, it is in fact another mandate from the state, but I see a lot of potential in the direction that they've chosen to go. And I believe we're going to get some great information on our kids, and ideally allow our kindergarten teachers to really jumpstart targeting instruction for kids. And one of the other nice parts about this particular assessment, based on how kids are developing and where they're at given points in time, it's a very good predictor of who's going to be successful in 3rd grade. And when you looked at the research that supports this particular model, I mean, they have done studies and they get a good correlation. And for a school district, I mean, you can talk about putting time and resources in all types of different places. But the reality is, if a child is on track in 3rd grade, for more or less, virtually all the kids that are there, they're going to be successful all through high school. So if we can get a good feeling in kindergarten as to who's progressing where they need to be developmentally at the age of 5 or 6, I mean, we should be able to step in and provide some really early interventions that ideally allow all of our kids, or virtually all of our kids, to be where they need to be in 3rd grade. And if we can be there as a school district, our chances of having virtually all of our kids be successful through high school is dramatically improved. So just to recap, while this is just another thing in a lot of people's eyes coming through the Department of Ed, I believe, in fact, it does have a lot of merit. I believe there's a lot of potential for us, not only with our kindergarten teachers, where it's required, but also with our pre-K, where I believe we should implement as well, to have a big impact. And once it's in place in a year or 2 years, and we have a chance to figure out how it fits into the overall scheme of assessments, I believe we can then figure out, are we redundant in areas with Ames Web, or is the Park K-2 going to pick up different pieces, and we can figure out how to sort it out. But in the interim, as a bridge measure, until the park comes online, I believe this is actually a very a beneficial tool for us, and we should just simply embrace it and go with it.
Questions?
No, it looks great.
I have a couple based on just some of the bullet points that you have in here. This talks about how it is aligned with the accreditation standards for kindergartens. Are we in fact currently, do we run the accreditation process?
Now one of the things with the kindergarten grant is it does require NAEYC accreditation. But what we did is NAEYC accreditation wasn't designed for public schools.
Okay.
It's actually something that came out of New York City, and it was designed, it was really something that was pushed by wealthy people in New York that wanted to have a way to rate all the private preschools in New York City.
I knew that my daughter's private kindergarten was in fact accredited 20 years ago.
And it's
Princeton Prep.
But when you look at what is the motivation for the state in pursuing it, my personal belief is it's a nice way for them to have an outside agency come in at a given school district's expense to accredit and rate, the preschool so that they don't have to do it. One of the things that we did is there was the ability to move towards an assessment tool as opposed to NAEYC accreditation a number of years ago, and I did in fact pursue a waiver on the NAEYC accreditation to move to something called the Ready Schools assessment. The reason I did it is it's a NAEYC accreditation. It's very expensive every year, and it's an incredible amount of time, not just for the principal, but for the entire faculty to gear up for one of these visits. And the Ready School assessment is an assessment the principal conducts in conjunction with the school improvement process. So what they do is there's actually an assessment to determine how the school does in bringing kids on. It can be aligned really well with the MKEA that we're talking about tonight. So we moved in that direction as an assessment tool that then informs the school improvement planning process. So we elected to waive the NAEYC accreditation to pull in an assessment tool that actually aligns with the school district improvement planning process, which we have. So it's not an outside piece, but something that actually lines up with what we already do. Saves time, saves money, and actually informs a school improvement plan as opposed to being a standalone. So.
And my other thing is we talk about Ames Web, and I see that in very simplistic terms as a tool that the teacher uses to fill in information about a student, record information so that they can make assessments. Yet I see Park K-2, and I think that it is student involved, or is it more teacher observation based? And
the Park K-2, we really don't have the kind of information we have about it. We're not seeing samples like we're seeing on the exams that we expect to see implemented more recently, 2017. That's really up in the air.
Okay.
In Park itself, I mean, things change all the time. I don't even want to speculate on what it's going to look like until we actually see it.
You mentioned it wasn't computer-based. I've pictured little 3-year-olds filling in the bubble next to a piece of text.
Very good, Joyce. They get better and better the younger they.
But no, I appreciate that we don't have the information. It was just I didn't know if we're actually making the kids testing them, or if we're using assessment tools.
I would imagine the Park piece would probably be something similar to this. In this assessment, this is very different than, for instance, for Ames Web. For Ames Web, the kids will come in and they'll be tested. We have what they call SWAT teams, which go in and we have teachers trained to do the assessments, and they go in and basically a day they assess the whole school, or over a couple days assess the whole school. But it's a snapshot in time. So at a given point, we will benchmark assessment, then we go back, we check again, and we check again at the end of the year. And so we look for student growth throughout the year. And ideally what we do, in mid-year, we target kids for remediation based on the growth they've made from that initial assessment to that mid-year piece. And what's different about this assessment is it's an ongoing assessment based on observations. So it's never the teacher simply asking a battery of questions or somebody coming in and doing assessment. It's based on observations that take place all the time. And there will be a technology component, and although the state is going to fund licenses, I mean, there's a cost associated with this, and there'll be a technology component that we'll bring online for our teachers to simplify the process of cataloging all the information.
Yeah.
But it's based on informed assessments where we teach our teachers what to look for, so they can catalog behaviors and catalog abilities or the lack of a given ability in a student, and then use those things to correlate and make informed decisions as to where a student is developmentally, that then determines what they can do and what they're capable of doing and what they should learn next.
Thank you. Sylvanie.
So, will kindergarten students be tested? Go through the same kind of testing system? I mean, part of it is a little horrifying.
No, this is not something that the student will ever even realize that they're being assessed.
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
And we have to figure out the logistics of it. And there's actually a conference in April.
You can use a bright lamp like this.
And there's a conference in April where we can send some of our people.
Okay.
So I'm hoping we can send a kindergarten teacher from every building and a couple administrators to get a better feel for what it's going to look like to implement.
Yeah.
And what is the time requirement going to be? But the feedback on this from teachers on this
Yeah,
particular
okay.
assessment has been very positive, as well as from the district, the principals in the district. So I have high hopes that this is something that isn't going to be overly burdensome.
Yeah.
And overly expensive over time, where we get good information, we can act on it.
Mr. Dolinsky.
Question I had really was the grant funds. How much is this grant worth to us?
The kindergarten grant?
Kindergarten grant, yeah.
About $120,000. Now, the cost of this particular piece, when it all shakes out, this first year, the professional development is going to be covered by the Department of Ed. I'm waiting to be contacted by the vendor that they've hired to implement, and I want to target this for June while our teachers are still here, and we can. It's not necessarily the most productive time of the year. We wouldn't want to do it now. Now's the sweet spot of the year for instruction, but maybe as we get closer to the end of the year. There's also a conference that the department will pick up. I mean, we're going to have costs ongoing after the first year because I think the license is about $13 per student, and we run about 300 kids per grade level. So you can do the math on what that's going to cost, about $4,000 a year. And we are going to have a technology component because we'll have to pick up iPads because there's an app we can use that seamlessly allows the teacher to catalog information through the iPads and then put it in a database. And there's going to be that initial cost and a certain ongoing cost with that. But what the department's going to say is, well, we give you kindergarten grants, use those funds, and so it kind of is what it is. But I have to believe the benefit of doing this will be great. The other nice piece about this is once we get it up and running, there is the ability to give parents access to look at what the data looks like. So a parent can, on an ongoing basis, based on observations the teacher makes, understand how their child's doing developmentally. And I think that's better information than getting a report card 3 times a year against a standard, where you can see on an ongoing basis how your child's progressing. And I think that is potentially a tremendous asset for all parties involved. And we should have a very good idea what that's going to look like by the end of next year.
Mr. Dolinsky.
The 120,000, not to belabor the point, the $120,000 is a one-time?
No,
It's
every year.
continual.
There's a history to the full-day kindergarten grant, which goes back quite a few years to days of my predecessors when...
Talking about 12 years or so of the kindergarten grant, the full-time kindergarten's been in place since...
$120,000 a
well,
year?
but it's
12
been
years?
cut over
No, it's been cut,
the
yeah.
years. So when the
funding.
full-day kindergarten grant was initiated, Stoughton, along with a few other districts, took it on to develop the full-day kindergarten program. And there was a debate, school committee debate amongst educators, and did the town want to go the direction of full-day kindergarten? And actually not everybody did. Although after it was implemented, that nobody's ever wanted to look back. The kindergarten grant was never enough to open full-day kindergarten. It was just enough to get you started, and as it's been cut over the years, the district has taken on the cost of full-day kindergarten. So it really pays for a couple of teachers. It used to pay for a couple of teachers, 2.5 teachers, and a few kindergarten aides, and it doesn't anymore. It's something of a supplement. You could not start a full-day kindergarten in this town the way it is now in place using the kindergarten grant. I don't want to call it a token, but it was a seed money for the program to get up and running, which it has been now for many, many years. But it's deeply embedded in what we do now, and only a small portion of it is supported by the grant.
I do know another town, another town that charges for kindergarten.
Yes.
We are amongst
a few
I believe
that
3
give
or
free.
4 free full-day kindergarten districts left in Massachusetts. There may have been, since that was in the worst of the recession, there may have been an expansion of that again, but we were one of the very few left. But if you charge, it's a barrier. It absolutely is a barrier. And if you do some full, some half, it's a mess for first grade teachers. And so this is one of the things that Stoughton has done very, very well, and used the grant to the fullest, but it does not support the entire program. It hasn't for a very long time.
No, but I think, again, my child was one of those who benefited from it right at the cutoff. It is the reason I sent my first child to private kindergarten, and it is the reason I chose to send my son here when it came. And I think that, Mr. Sarner was very eloquent in saying that even within the first year or two, the results in terms of the services that were needed in first grade were so far less than they had been in previous years, due to the fact that we had those kids full day and that everybody had equal access to it, including the kids that were most in need. So I'm incredibly proud of this town for its continued support of this.
Very visionary.
Yeah. And it is hard to believe that towns around us don't have full-day kindergarten either as an option, or that it is paid.
Oh, I know one that does,
Yeah.
has it, and
Yeah.
you have to pay.
Yeah.
That's all right. Let's move it along.
Okay. Yes.
But I had one simple question and one suggestion. I missed the beginning of your presentation. When I was reading this, it says the department. The department is school department?
The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. There's
So the department, DESE is collaborating with the Department of Early Education and Care?
Yep.
Is that what we are saying?
yes.
Okay. And the suggestion is, the assessment and, carrying the assessment results over the years. We all noticed that there is an interesting article in the town meeting warrant. So it may be a good idea for us to think about having some kind of a data retention policy, or some kind of an explanation on how we use the data and how long we keep it. Maybe in one of the meetings, we can talk about it, or maybe you can come up with some kind of a document or recommendation.
Which specific data?
Do you remember, Joyce?
Longitudinal.
Longitudinal data
data.
required for Common Core. There's an article that basically is asking
A
us
town
not to
meeting article.
participate in that process,
And not to collect data or
Not
not
to
to
collect data,
retain it.
which is kind of a
I think it's good for us to think about how we use the data and how long we keep it.
the issue at hand, though, with that article wasn't how we use the data, it's how the state used the data to track students.
Right.
And we, in fact, have no control over what the state requires of us and how the state
That's right.
uses the data, which I think is the focus of that article. Yeah.
So maybe you can take a look at it and come up with some kind of a recommendation.
I'll pass the
for-
articles on so that you go.
Well,
I'll pass it on to everybody so you can
Well,
all see.
generally, the district keeps 7 years of data once a student graduates. And then basically, we just keep a permanent record card and a permanent record of data forever on that student.
But don't we, if you collect kindergarten data, don't you keep it through 12, grade
Yeah.
12?
Right. And
Yeah,
then
but-
7 years beyond
but
for that
7 years
student.
And 7
beyond
years
that, and then-
beyond, okay.
And that's the rule of thumb.
Okay.
At that point, we're no longer required to keep
Right.
the data. So,
All right.
all right,
Very good, thank you.
thank you.
Going on to, these will be quick, at least for me. The under old business, I can tell you right off the top, under A and C, I have no new updates because neither committee has met, one due to snow. Feasibility study update?
Yep, I'm sure that everybody knows the great news about the high school. We have 270 days to implement some of the prerequisites. The huge one, which is the feasibility study, which is already done, got done, was appropriated by town meeting. The next big thing we have to do is to establish a school building committee. I've certainly heard from a number of people in town who would be excellent candidates, given their technical backgrounds, to be on the school building committee. The old feasibility study committee, which hasn't met in about a year and a half, is going to be meeting soon. We're going to go over what needs to be done to kind of move this forward, and establish some criteria for the candidates for the school building committee. But just such great news, such great news.
And Mr. Dolinsky.
Just one question. The 270-day, that started on the day that
We were
we
invited
were
into the
approved,
process, yes.
right? So we're now, what, 10, 11 days into the procedure. Shouldn't we be accelerating getting this, the requirements pushed a little bit more than, you know what I'm saying? I think it's something
We are
that...
actually, yeah.
Well, there are six targets that we have to meet within the 270 days. 2 of them had 30-day deadlines. One I know which has already been fully signed off on. The other, I believe, may have been the initial enrollment. I'd have to go back to the
Agreement.
list.
Yeah.
And that one is in fact data that we already have. There's a certified enrollment that has to happen about 90 days or 120 days down the line. So yes, there is in fact a checklist. Many of those items do not lie with us. Actually, most of them do not lie with us.
Yeah.
They lie either with the town manager, with the superintendent. There's a combination of who's responsible for what. There is a caseworker assigned to that. I know she will be having an extensive discussion with Mr. Hartman, and which is her point of contact for this, to lay out the requirements. But in fact, there's a checklist, and the people who are responsible for those things are on the MSBA email list as to who's responsible for what, and they are underway. I think it is a good point that as we get going, we can include that into the old business in terms of reporting on what has in fact been submitted, because like I said, we are signed the compliance certificate. And I think the other one was the initial enrollment projection.
I believe so.
Which again is data that we have. Dr. Earl.
I had 2 questions. One is, at the last meeting, Ms. Sovini said that the feasibility committee was going to be dissolved. So we are not dissolving it
I'm going to
anymore?
bring that up. You know, we're going to have to
Well, they have to
vote on
meet
that.
first, yeah.
We have to meet first.
So next meeting it will be dissolved?
You know, we'll have a discussion about that.
Okay. Now, who will appoint the school building committee?
We're figuring out what the process is.
Now, when you get those applications, would you share it with the school committee members?
Well, here's what's happening at this point. Anybody who's contacting me, and several people have, I am forwarding them on to Ms. Sauvigny because of her involvement with the feasibility committee, but I'm also explaining to them that at some point when the process is finalized, figured out, as we said, they will in fact get turned over to whatever board, and they may in fact require their own application process with requesting maybe a resume or more information. Every town is different. There's no standard answer to who does assigns a building committee for an MSBA project, because it varies by town charter and by type of government. So we are going through the process of figuring out what Stoughton's charter and matrix says in
But
terms
still,
of.
all I'm asking is to inform the school committee members. I heard people send resumes to you, and then you tell them that you forward them to Ms. Sauvigny. But I suggest that send them to the school committee members too.
I guess my only concern is if we are in fact not the appointing authority, I'm just sending them there because she's in
I haven't
feasibility
gotten any
right now.
resumes.
No resumes.
I'm just
emails of interest.
Just inquiries. That's all. And
share them with the school committee.
And I just answer the emails.
But my only concern is if it is not our place to make that decision,
That's right.
and it is not our place
Still
to.
share them with the school committee.
Well, I am sharing the information. That's why it's on the agenda.
And one of
You're
the
not sharing the
excuse me, one of the items that is in the compliance certification is that in fact all of the process that is meeting-based will be public meetings. So if this falls to the selectmen or if it falls to the town manager, it will fall to them to in fact make that process public. It is not my place to disseminate information that would be coming to them. But we will make sure that everything, in fact, because we've asserted so to the MSBA, that we will all follow the laws, and it will be fully publicly compliant. But it may not be our responsibility. It may be, like I said,
So
selectmen.
share them with the school committee, that's all I'm saying.
Can't share it if it's not mine, is what I'm saying. But yes, it's a good point. I think everything will be public.
Okay, next.
Subcommittee, standing subcommittee updates.
Wellness update?
No, I said wellness and
Oh, there is
facilities.
nothing.
Didn't I mean?
We all
Wellness is
know.
only meeting quarterly at this point, so there's really nothing new to report. Standing subcommittees, are
Nothing
there?
at this end.
Please, can you tell me if the budget subcommittee has
We haven't.
scheduled a meeting?
Not
Are
yet.
you going to?
I'm going to have to work on it.
Thank you. And
Either.
since we're at this side of the table, before I get to you,
Work something out.
have we scheduled, and excuse me for forgetting, have we scheduled a follow-up to the policy?
Yeah, I think we have 18th, Mary?
18th, that sounded familiar.
I'll send you an agenda.
Okay. Other subcommittee.
The communications, the community relations subcommittee has not met, but I will fill you in on our Jean Ostroff's work, who is our part-time communications specialist. The Facebook page, the Stoughton Public Schools Facebook page that she's set up in less than 2 weeks, has about 500 followers, and she sent me a number of statistics which I wasn't able to get on my iPad here in a form that was easily shared, but we do have about our reach is about 3,000, and yeah, which is pretty phenomenal. So the interesting thing for me, and having been to the focus group on education at the Master Plan Committee set up, I thought that we were doing a pretty good job communicating everything that's going on in the schools, things that are happening, and clearly, based on the Facebook page, there was definitely a hunger for kind of more information in terms of events and good news to share. So that's what's going on, and I urge anybody who's interested to definitely look at what's going on with the Facebook page. It's really interesting. And
Follow them
there's
and
a-
like them, yes.
Yes, they absolutely do. Oh, and the last thing, I'm sorry, the last thing I wanted to add is that Ms. Ostroff told me that she was going to be meeting with the principals and other people around.
She's already begun that.
So what kind of information do you have about her, or just that she's met with them to?
I don't know how many principals she's met with yet, but I've talked to a couple who were really excited about having her and what it is that she's able to do for them. So as they get to meet her, they're really excited. We
Good.
had I guess this was a snow day too, but we had planned to have her come to our administrators leadership team meeting.
Oh, great.
The last one was canceled because of snow, or was rescheduled, and so she hasn't had the chance to meet the entire team as a team, but she's been making visits to the buildings. And
Great.
so she's been very enthusiastically received up to this point. I've talked to 2 people who've met with her so far.
Mr. Delinsky.
Did we ever determine whether she's going to be responsible for the webpage?
We're in the process of doing a search for our technology department, so I think that we need to complete that process to assign all the responsibilities to whomever is going to have them.
She's capable of adding to the web page. I think that's what we had talked about.
Right, and the webpage has always been Dr. Gray's purview, and we'll look at whether that makes sense, whether the technology director should continue to do that with the things the technology director has to do. So at the current time, it still remains as Dr. Gray's responsibility.
I think it would be best served if she handled it personally, because I think his responsibilities should be more involved with the technical aspect rather than doing the update for those that don't use Facebook, but do go to the webpage, should have the same type of information available to them. And if you're going to have a webpage that's out of date,
Well, do understand, though, from the webpage perspective, that it is not one person's responsibility. Dr. Gray is responsible for the structure and new page additions. The content of the web pages is and always has been driven by the consumers of it, by the principals at the elementary school, by, Pat Small has the ability to add health news. We all have, there are a number of people who are responsible for their content. And you can't make a Dr. Gray responsible to reach out and ask a principal what needs to go on the webpage. They have to be driven to do so, just like they have to be driven to tell Ms. Ostroff that there's information on it. So it comes down to kind of a mentality shift about people understanding that that's part of their responsibility and maybe assigning the actual updating of it. But everybody who has a portion on the webpage has that ability through no web special software, just by email and Word, to be able to do updates and to send district-wide messages and emails to class
maybe, I
parents.
think it should be centralized, but moving right along.
Okay.
Joyce?
Dr. Earl.
When Ms. Sauvigny said Ms. Ostroff is capable of contributing to a web page, that's what we talked about. I would like to ask her through you, who did she talk with, Ms. Sauvigny, and where and when?
The community relations specialist
I
is...
didn't ask you. I asked Ms. Sauvigny.
She talks to the school administration. I'm not her boss.
She's our employee.
Yeah, she's
Ms.
not our
Sauvigny
employee.
said that's what we talked about. What are you talking about?
In her interview.
So you went to her interview?
I sat in on her interview. That's not unusual for school committee members to sit in on
How
interviews.
were you appointed to be sit down in her interview?
Because I'm on the community relations committee.
At the last meeting, you said that you met, but you didn't. You did not post the meeting. Today, you said you did not meet.
We didn't have a meeting.
Then how did you decide you were the one who's going to be?
Dr. Rizzi and I interviewed her.
Dr. Brown was not on the interviews.
Right.
This wasn't a full subcommittee.
Right.
I think the open meeting law has been broken.
Okay, okay,
But that's fine.
right now.
Okay.
No other standing subcommittees, fine. Correspondence.
None.
I thought there was a fourth
I thought there was a
standing
fourth one,
committee,
too.
wasn't there? What was the fourth?
Negotiations,
Negotiations?
which is really a
okay.
special
All right.
standing subcommittee. And we all know that those are ongoing. Correspondence, none. Acceptance of minutes for the regular meeting of December 10th, 2013.
I had a few revisions, minor.
Okay, let me get to that page.
This is more to, I wasn't sure if it was quoted right. That's on page 4, third line from the top. Mr. Harding explained as much as he understands Stoyak's position, the school department would lose $45,000 plus if we exempt Stoyak from these fees. So I don't know if that, maybe Mary can check her notes if that's.
I know, I
that
see
sounds kind of too high.
as much as you think the amount is too high?
That we are talking about losing 45,000. We didn't make change that would add up to 45, but maybe we did.
That was
So-
the figure that Mr.
Evangelista.
Evangelista, okay, all right. And the other one is page 7, Special Education Subcommittee, just to correct CPAC, SSEPAC.
Good enough?
And then the last item is on the list of documents and other exhibits. I would add the legal subcommittee description. Those are the things that we looked at. Special education subcommittee description. And The Caroline Campbell letter, I don't know. I think we all received it before the meeting. Did we look at it at the meeting?
No.
Do you remember?
Do not believe so. We did not read it
I
into
leave
the
it up to
record.
you. And then, so those are the changes. And then I had one question. I wonder if it would make sense to add the, from now on, not for this one particularly, but to add the that public comment sign-up sheet to the minutes.
You mean a copy of it?
Yeah, copy of it. Or what do we do with those?
Well, it's a cumulative one, and they're crossed off as they're addressed,
I see.
and the comment is recorded.
How do we?
In the minutes.
So we. So
And
the address is. How do we capture the ones that the chair chooses not to let speak?
I've only chose not to let the one person speak, which is today.
I thought there was some others in the. Wasn't there others?
For that large meeting where we had it in the auditorium, we managed to get everybody
Yeah.
in.
We did.
Yep.
Yes, we did.
But it may be. I don't know. Either have a mechanism of saving those,
Off
or easier to put it in the minutes.
They're in the, well, like I said, the person speaks, they're in the minutes along with their address and the content of their comment.
Okay. So the one.
And it will be recorded today that I actually declined to allow Mr. Soares to speak. So
But you didn't say what was the purpose he wanted to speak about.
She doesn't have to.
Right?
again, we'll discuss this at the next meeting when it's on
No,
our
what
agenda.
I'm saying is it may be easier just to make a copy of it and append it to the minutes.
Okay.
Well, again, I don't know why we're setting that precedent. I don't know that it matters if we. I stated my reasons for not allowing him to speak on it. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter what the comment is because it was based on the decision from council. But Dr. Brown,
Madam Chair, it's almost 10 o'clock.
oh my goodness, yes
I'm
it
going
is.
to this.
We're going to have meetings every week.
First, I would like to say that this is diverging. This is about what you'd like to see in the future. Let's vote on I'd like to have a motion for the changes that you had, the CPAC change.
Those are just editorial changes, so I don't think.
Well, it was just the
Oh, you
CPAC
mean
one that was an
do it
actual
as
change.
So I make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
And as amended being with just the abbreviation for CPAC. Do I have a
CPAC
second?
and also the list of documents.
A list of documents, thank you. Do I have a second?
George?
Oh, I'll second it, but I'm not going to, all right, I'll second it just for the
Okay.
purposes
Thank you,
of
George.
wherever. No,
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm
There
gonna-
are just editorial changes, so I don't know what you guys are.
Abstaining.
We'll
so I
sleep.
mean,
You're abstaining?
Because I mentioned in the minutes. and
I
I'm going to-
understand, I
And therefore, I
understand, I
think it would be
understand.
improper.
No, that's not true because you did the-
Because
He
it
was part of the
involves,
story. He's allowed to abstain if he feels that
Because-
it's
Okay.
a conflict of interest.
be considered a conflict if I vote.
So are the changes,
Nothing personal.
Madam Chair, just adding the two documents?
And changing the abbreviation for CPAC, correcting it so that it says CPAC instead of SEAC.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Do I even want you to second the motion?
I don't know.
If
Do you
you're-
want me? I mean, nobody else is to the left of you was seconding anything, so.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. For accepting the minutes as amended.
Aye.
I think unanimous.
We are
except
No,
for
I'm-
and then one abstention.
and I'm
Four,
abstaining.
yes, thank you. Other matters, I believe we're on, and I have one.
I have two.
Mr. Souza mentioned to me when he came in that February 18th at the O'Donnell Middle School, sponsored by the PTSO, is the World Series trophy. Please, somebody.
Yeah.
Yes, World Series
Thank you.
trophies, that's what he said. Not that he spoke to me, but.
That will be at the OMS from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m., and that it is coffee and baked goods will be for sale, that it is an event that they would love for the community to come out
It's February 18th where?
at the middle school. And I will make sure that that information gets passed on to Ms. Ostroff so she can
So that's
post that as
open
well.
to public?
It's open to the, absolutely. Come and buy coffee and cookies, too.
Okay. It's kind of an unusual time for public to come in, though. Wonder if we could
When
make
it was available.
It is when it's, I'm sure that the.
8 o'clock to
We
10
can do it
o'clock.
in the evening?
Yeah.
Not at
I
8
didn't
p.m. or 8
arrange it.
a.m.?
8 a.m.
Wow.
to 10 a.m. I am sure that it is on a tour that we are
I'm
fortunate
sure
to
it
get
is.
Exactly.
for those
right.
hours. That is my other matter.
Joyce?
Yes, sir.
Also in middle school, I think tomorrow, I forgot to bring the flyer. There is a interesting talk sponsored by Youth Commission and possibly our Parent Engagement Center about how to talk to your...
Adolescents, yeah.
Is it tomorrow?
That's a good question. I don't know.
It's on the Facebook page, so let me check.
So
Any
that-
excuse to go on Facebook during school hours.
And then the other one is this report bearing the picture of town manager and superintendent. I think it's great, but I'm disappointed at the process because this is going to be the front matter of the budget. And we have been asking the superintendent to work on it and let the school committee in the loop. In fact, it's in the December 10 meeting minutes. I was asking, where is that part, and she said she's going to work on it later. And then we get this on February 4th by an email from Dr. Rizzi. And our copy is marked preliminary draft. And then I find the Finance Committee got this a week before we did. And it's not marked preliminary draft. So I think that this is really the epitome of the problem, the transparency issue. I wish maybe we still have time to work on it, to improve it. So that's my other matter.
Very good.
First of all, I just like to say I am pleased that the town manager and the superintendent have worked so closely on this. I do know that the superintendent's portion of this product has been done for a while, and that in fact, because the selectmen's process is several weeks behind ours, that their additions to this document were far more recent.
Right.
But that being said, it is their document.
So what I'm saying is that we could have seen it
It's
when
their
it was
document.
ready. No, it's our document because this is going to the town
summary.
meeting as a school committee budget.
The budget is our document.
Correct.
The summary is
The executive summary was this year written by the two executive officers of both sides of the town. It's our executive summary, which we worked on together, the two of us. It was not the product of either board.
So maybe you put a caveat, school committee had nothing to do with the executive summary part.
So I just want to add and compliment you on that joint executive summary, because I think it's an absolute model for how every town should be. It's something certainly 4 years ago that I hoped that eventually we would get to that point, and we got there much sooner than I thought. And I really kudos to both you and the town manager for working so collaboratively and cooperatively on something that's so important and that reflects our values. So thank you.
Are there other matters? Do you have other matters?
I do not.
I'd like to move along.
I would like to move along as well. So with that said, we do have executive session tonight. We have financial warrants that will be distributed in the school committee room. The executive session tonight is for the acceptance of minutes of the executive session of December 10th, 2013, for collective bargaining strategy for Unit A, and for a grievance update, which fall under, I'm recalling my document, not so quickly.
I got it.
My fat finger doesn't want to hit the button. Thank you. I believe it's. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. Do I have a motion?
Is
Oh,
Beth
next, sorry, the joint meeting, next joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen is tomorrow night, February 12th, 2014, 7 o'clock in the Yatanis Room, I believe, at Town Hall. The next regular meeting of the school committee is February 25th, 2014. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So made.
Second.
A roll call vote, Dr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Sauvanet?
Yes.
Mr. Delinsky?
Yes.
Dr. Earl?
Yes.
And yes, myself. There are no votes that will be taken tonight during executive session. Is that correct? So we will be adjourning from executive session. Thank you all.